All right, we're going to go ahead and call our November 1st, 2022 meeting to order.
Is his mic on?
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember White. Councilmember Stone.
Present.
Councilmember Warren.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem DeForest.
Here.
Mayor Ingram.
I am present.
Let the record reflect that all members are present with the exception of Councilmember White, who has an excused tardiness.
Okay. Public comments, please.
Seeing none.
Okay, announcement of closed session items.
As listed on the agenda, the City Council will meet in closed session on 4 items. CS1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, Title of Position City Manager. They will also meet in closed session number 2, same performance evaluation, however, for the title position of City Attorney. CS3, Conference with Legal Counsel, Anticipated Litigation, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4, considering whether to initiate litigation in one case. And finally, CS4, Conference with Legal Counsel, Anticipated Litigation, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2 and D3, significant exposure to litigation in one case.
Okay. Is that enough?
We're ready to recess, yes?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and recess to closed session. See you at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. All right, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order for November 1st, 2022. Announcement of closed session actions. Madam City Attorney.
City Council met in closed session on 4 items. The first was a performance evaluation of the city manager pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. The council performed the evaluation, no reportable action. The second item was the performance evaluation of the city attorney, also pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. The council gave the performance evaluation, no reportable action. The third item was anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. The council was updated, no reportable action. The fourth item was regarding anticipated litigation, exposure to litigation in one case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2 and D3. Again, the council was updated, no reportable action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember White. Here. Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Warren.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem DeForest.
Here.
Mayor Ingram.
Present.
Let the record reflect that all members are present and that Councilmember White attended closed session, arriving at 4:35.
Okay, fantastic. This time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Remember, as we're pledging our allegiance to this flag, what it stands for, all that have fallen for it, in the country that we live in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor. Good evening, sir.
To be here today. Let us bow for the invocation. Holy One, God of many names, God beyond all names, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of community and justice, Spirit of wisdom. We ask your blessings tonight on the people who have been called to lead this community in which we live and work and play. Help them as leaders to not ask first, how do we fix this, but what do we need to learn? What might we need to change? To whom do we need to listen? And then let them prepare to do the work. Remind them, because we all forget from time to time, especially in this noisiness of what passes for political debate, that they are not only leaders, but they are also servants. You've given them servant hearts, and that is why they are here. And that is their responsibility as they serve the common good of all. Remind each of us no matter where we live, and as we carry out our work and play and daily life here in this community, that everyone here in this community, no matter who they are or what they are called by, are your people. They are neighbors, our siblings, and that through the ages, prophets have called the leaders, the people to respect and protect the least of those among us, children and elderly, poor and the hungry, homeless, and all who are ill in body, mind, and spirit. Grant these leaders today and us the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. Grant them wisdom tonight, Lord, as they carry out their work. And this we pray in the name of the universal Spirit and God of all people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to do presentations at this time. Madam City Clerk and Councilmember White to present.
Thank you,
Madam City
Mr.
Clerk.
Mayor. Yes, this is for Jill Byers, and Council Member White will
Okay,
read the proclamation.
Councilmember White.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Jill, will you join me? And your husband, Matt Byers? There also are some slides. If we could have slide 1, please. I'll go ahead. One of the things our council does is recognize individuals and community members. And there are those who live here that take constructive actions to make an impact on the rest of us. And something really touched my heart recently, and it's my honor to introduce you to Murrieta resident Jill Byers. Jill challenged herself to walk with a purpose to emphasize veteran suicides. Sadly, the U.S. Veteran Administration statistics indicate that every day 22 veterans will commit suicide on American soil. If I could have slide 2, which is up, that's great. With Veterans Day coming up on November 11th, and our Rotary Club Murrieta's week-long Field of Honor in Town Square Park, and Murrieta's Veterans Day Parade, it seemed a fitting time to recognize Jill Byers and her efforts to bring awareness to the tragedy of veteran suicide. Slide 3, please. On July 22nd, Jill successfully completed walking 2,022 miles to honor fallen veterans, and she completed this in Murrieta's Town Square Park at our Veterans Memorial. While walking, Jill carries the American flag on her back and the names of veterans lost to suicide around her neck in an effort to increase awareness of the mental issues those soldiers fought. Although her 2,022-mile walk challenge may be complete, Jill's mission was to increase awareness, and that still continues. Jill believes that a veteran suicide and discussion of suicidal thoughts is still a taboo subject of discussion in our communities, in families, and in the military. The military does teach our men and women to soldier on and to carry on no matter what, and it becomes very hard for many of them to reach out for help about their inner turmoil. Jill's heard countless stories, and I've spoken to her a lot, about veterans who've lost, veterans lost from self-inflicted harm. Slide 4, please. Jill also shared with me that she has an adult son who was wounded in Afghanistan and was medically retired. She says that they go through hell and they hold so much of it inside. Some cope and some don't handle it so well. They're told in the military to just toughen it up and hold it in, but this destroys many from the inside out. Jill believes that it's critical that we each take actions to personally support the countless organizations devoted to seeing that veterans find the help they need, even if financial donations cannot be made. Supporting an organization, such as you'll see on slide 5, and helping to spread the word is very impactful. So there's a list on the screen of resources that Jill suggests, and if you would just even give an hour of your time or pledge to assist these organizations in some way, that would be meaningful and help with the cause and certainly bring awareness, as Jill's endeavored to do. There was a person, Jill, that inspired, if you'll talk into the mic, inspired you to walk these 2,022 miles? Would you speak about
Sure.
him?
There was a couple of them actually. John Ring with walkforveterans.org. He walked from the East Coast to the West Coast to bring veteran issues and make an awareness to that. And walking with him a handful of times in California, Mississippi, and Georgia, I in turn met Miranda Briggs, and her story was devastating. She had a 2-week-old child, and her husband, Garrett, he's an Army Ranger veteran, took his life in 2018. And through her pain and her suffering, though, she pressed on and she started Fight the War Within. And through that, hearing her story, she really motivated me. On any challenging days, I would think of those that I was walking for, and they really helped me push on.
And would you also speak about what you've learned about mobility issues and how important it is for veterans?
Yes, what I've learned through that is through Wheelchairs for Warriors. And veterans who are immobile, it can lead to isolation, which causes mental erosion, and many of them become one of the 22. But some are denied or delayed care, and that's where they fill in the gap. And through that, if they get a proper fit wheelchair designed for their specific needs, it helps restore that mobility, activity, and independence, and it greatly improves their quality of life.
Thank you. And I think that the organizations that you've suggested that we support deal with wheelchairs.
Yes,
Wheelchairs for Warriors. So on behalf of the council and the mayor, we'd like to present this to you. So now, therefore, let it be known that Mayor Ingram, on behalf of the city and City Council of Murrieta, do recognize Jill Byers' outstanding achievement and dedication to honor fallen soldiers and bring awareness to the suicide rates in the veteran community. And we'd like to present this to you, and thank you for your efforts and bringing recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Councilmember White, there's some council members that would like to make comment. Okay, starting with Councilmember Stowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jill, I want to commend you for your efforts. I'm a mother of a veteran, and my son experienced a explosion in the nuclear power program on a submarine. And while he's a veteran today, he does suffer from PTSD. And I am very involved in his life and making sure as a mother that he has all the resources that he needs. And he's doing great. So God bless him today, but we don't know what the future holds for him. And, you know, your goal is to reduce the stigma, increase support, and prevent tragedies. Mayor Ingram and I sit on a committee for mental behavior health, and I would love for you to join us and be a voice for our veterans. And you can contact me through the city, and I will give you the dates and times of our meetings, and we encourage you to come and be a voice. So God bless you.
Councilmember Warren.
Every time I saw you walk with that flag, it gave me goosebumps. I'm a very proud wife of a Vietnam veteran who, through his own devices, got through it okay, but it could have gone the other way really fast. And I was honored to be by his side. So thank you for bringing awareness. Thank you for being the citizen and the American that you are, because you are just fabulous. Thank you so very much.
Thank your husband. Tell him welcome home.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Jill, I'd like to just say congratulations on amazing. Can you hear me? All right, I'll use a different one. There we go. Yes, power is on. Jill, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment, and thank you for raising awareness of our veterans. Also, it was always an honor to see you walk in front of my business on Ivy Street quite often. I would see you walking on the corner as well of Madison. And every time we went by, we tried to scream and yell for you and thank you. It was a wonderful thing to see you walking, and we appreciate everything you've done. So thank you so much. And what an honor. Congratulations.
Thank you. The first thing that went through my mind is when you hear 2,000 miles, my feet started to hurt. And I was like, wow, that's commitment. It takes a lot. And I looked at my pedometer and went, well, I got a lot of steps to catch up with her. So that it's amazing that you have that much commitment and passion. I also come from military. My family, my son-in-law just left, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. My dad served in the military. I'm an Army brat. So, stay strong, keep your conviction strong, and keep doing what you're doing, because it's people like you that make our country and our community what it is today. God bless you.
Yeah, I do want to thank the council so much for your support and recognition for our veterans. And one thing I just wanted to say is I accept this on behalf of everyone that I walk for. It was all of our servicemen and women who are struggling with issues that they endured while serving, those who lost their battles, families who are grieved by such a tragic loss, and again, the many great veteran service organizations that work tirelessly to help those in need. So, and also for this community, it was to walk to bring the awareness to our community, because walking with John Ring in those various states, when 2022 came around and this challenge came around, it was like, what can I do in my town? But this community was so encouraging, and the gratitude was there, the support, the generosity, and so thank you to the community as well. One last thing, for anyone who has served or is a veteran, thank you for your service, many, many sacrifices. You are remembered and greatly appreciated. Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Warren. I think you have a proclamation to present. Color the World Orange Awareness Day. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Deborah, would you please join me up here? I met this fine, wonderful lady a few years ago, and who suffers from a very, very debilitating illness that nobody can put really their finger on. And we've bonded a really great friendship. And she came to me telling me about the month of November, Color the World Orange Awareness Day. And I thought this would be fitting to do a proclamation in honor of that, and all you have strived to make this an awareness and help everybody that you're helping. So let me read this proclamation, please. I don't know who's shorter, them or me. I think it's me. Color the World Orange Awareness Day. Whereas reflex symptomatic dystrophy, RSD, also known as complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS, is a chronic neurological pain syndrome that affects one or more extremities along with organs, joints, and muscles. And whereas on November 7th, 2022, members of the CRPS RSD community will celebrate the annual Color the World Orange Day to spread awareness of this poorly understood pain disorder. Whereas the symptoms of CRPS RSD are often described as burning that is out of proportion to the severity of the initial injury and can include inflammation and extreme sensitivity to touch. And whereas RSD CRPS has no cure, there are treatments aimed to easing pain, improving function. Whereas it is estimated that RSD CRPS affects up to 3 million people in the United States, and the onset of the disorder can occur at any age and affect both men and women. And whereas the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke and other divisions of the National Institute of Health support research relating to CRPS RSD. Now, therefore, on behalf of our Mayor, Jonathan Ingram, and the entire Murrieta City Council, do hereby proclaim November 7th, 2022 as Color the World Orange Awareness Day in the city of Murrieta. And it is such an honor to present this to you today. Can you please say a few words?
Council member, if you could, what is the name of the recipient? We didn't get your name.
Oh, Deborah Jankowski.
Thank you, Deborah.
My apologies. I should have said that.
That's okay.
I know it's Deborah.
First of all, thank you, Mayor, City Council, members of the community. This is huge for us. I started this foundation back in May of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. I have full body CRPS. It's a rarity, but it happens. It's in my intestines. It's also in my organs. Like Cindy said, there is no cure for it. So basically, I started this foundation. We're all volunteers to help those battling this. November, the whole month of November, we celebrate this to get the awareness out. But November 7th is a very special day for us. That's the day that we wear orange. We talk to you guys. We just get everybody out there. So I ask on behalf of the CRPS community, the CRPS Warriors Foundation, that if you can, please wear orange ribbon, orange shirt, put an orange light in your porch, and take a picture, and please tag our foundation at the CRPS Warriors Foundation on November 7th. I don't remember. Brain fog is with it too, so I apologize. But again, I'm very, very grateful. This is huge for us. We're trying so hard to raise awareness, raise funds, and the city of Murrieta has been absolutely amazing to us. And I am so proud to have our office here in Murrieta. So thank you all so much.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve our agenda.
Councilmember White?
I'm sorry, I'm just observing everything that's happened.
That's okay. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously, 5-0.
Okay. Department Commission announcements, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to remind everyone that 1 week from today is Election Day, and don't forget to vote.
Okay, fantastic. Councilmember White, Governing Body Commission announcements.
I have no commission announcements for tonight's meeting, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Councilmember Stone.
I have nothing to report with WRCOG at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Warren,
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I would also like to concur with the rest of my colleagues that I have no report as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll say I don't bend over backwards to help you. So everyone knows her microphone is not working, so we're sharing one. We're not up here. She's not up here beating on me when she's grabbing the mic. Okay, Madam City Clerk, our favorite part of the meeting, public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to confirm, you have no governing board reports?
No, not at this time.
Thank you very much. Now is the time for public comment. Any person may address the governing bodies on any subject pertaining to city business. Normally, no action may be considered or taken by the governing bodies on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Mr. Mayor, I see no non-agenda public comments.
Okay, and you had one item that there was a request for somebody to speak for 6 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and that's for the public hearing.
Okay. All right. All right, so at this time, we have nobody in the agenda to speak?
Seeing none.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I couldn't hear you. All right, so consent calendar, approval items 1 through 7. Madam City Clerk, are there any members of the public requesting to speak on consent calendar item?
I have no members. Actually, I apologize. I do. First and foremost, though, I'd like to note that staff is requesting that item number 6 get pulled. And I do have a comment for item 6.
Okay.
So, Anne Unmat.
Okay. Item number 6 was it. So
Item
it's
6.
1
She's
through
speaking on
7.
6.
We're removing 6. So comment on item number 6.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to come and personally thank the City of Murrieta for your tremendous leadership in tackling the issue of homelessness. I am thrilled to have this great partnership. I really want to applaud Brian Ambrose and his efforts that he's been doing to move forward and really address, is almost as a leader in our region of tackling this issue so efficiently. We have been able to help so many people due to your guys' faith in us and our partnership with CityNet. I'm just thrilled at what we've been able to accomplish. Moving forward with the Regional Homeless Alliance, I'm hoping that goes through and maybe can be something modeled as best practices that we can deal with this issue regionally, because homeless individuals don't always cross borders or stay within the borders of their city. So I just want to applaud Brian and the CityNet team in the city. And just to kind of bring a quick update, homelessness, since the moratorium has lifted, we have seen increased numbers, especially people with children. I think in our program currently, we're fluctuating between 70 or more children, lots of single mothers, single fathers, and 2-parent families. So between the rising rents, inflation, gas, the grocery store, we're seeing these numbers creep up quite a bit. So I can't thank you enough. And just to share with you some really good news, today was a great day. One of our mothers who came to us with no car, no job, and could not have her children, today came in and we were able to hand her a check for $2,200 through our client savings deposit program. She now has a 2-bedroom apartment, a car, a job, her children. And so what we're doing really, really changes lives. So thank you for your support and keep up the great work. It's incredible what we're doing here in Murrieta. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you,
so Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Is it okay if we vote on the consent items with the exception of item 6 before we move on?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay, if you could call for a motion in a second.
Calling for a motion in a second.
Motion carries unanimously, 5-0 for consent calendar items 1 through 7 with the exception of item number 6.
Okay. All right.
And now it's Mr. Ambrose for item 6.
Mr. Ambrose, you are on deck, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. For the agenda item on homeless services, staff needs to correct an item in the agenda report referencing amendments to the existing agreements with CityNet and Project Touch. After further analysis and discussions with the city attorney, new standalone agreements are necessary rather than amendments. In order not to confuse the issue, I have a brief presentation to fully describe all the actions before you. The recommendations in front of the City Council this evening are fourfold. Close out the Emergency Solutions Grant that we received last year from the county in the total of $1 million plus an additional $150,000. This allowed us to provide full-time street outreach, partner with Project Touch to create an emergency homeless shelter, and provide seamless case management services at the shelter with CityNet. Grant funds are now expended. Currently, our former contractor for street outreach and case management has a balance on their PO of nearly $230,000. We need to reappropriate this balance to CityNet and to Project Touch. That's item number one. Recommendation one. Recommendation two is maintain the existing services for street outreach and case management by entering month-to-month agreements with CityNet. Recommendation number three, maintain the existing partnership for the emergency shelter with Project Touch. And number four, accept and appropriate federal grant funding in the amount of $500,000 to formalize the Regional Homeless Alliance and begin the process of creating a Regional Homeless Action Plan. This is the grant funding that was advocated on our behalf by Congressman Ken Calvert. As mentioned, recommendations 2 and 3 on the agenda report request amending the agreements. After reviewing the existing agreements, there is a question of whether those agreements could be extended. The original agreements and subsequent amendments were specific to the emergency solutions grants, and those funds have been expended. The agreements for approval before the City Council tonight moves the funding to the city's homeless services budget. Therefore, legal opinion recommends that new standalone month-to-month agreements be executed using the city's standard agreement template reviewed by the city attorney. Long-term agreements will come forward to the City Council for approval at a future meeting. Regarding the need for the agreements, staff has compiled updated information for street outreach and emergency sheltering. Since May 1st, the street outreach team from CityNet has encountered 89 new unduplicated clients. That's an average of about 14 per month. Out of these 89, 57 had a street exit, meaning they are no longer considered homeless. That's a 64% success rate. Such exits can include diversion, emergency housing, and placement in many different facilities. 24 are no longer in Murrieta or is self-resolved, and 8 are considered long-term engagements, and we will continue regularly working with them. On the sheltering front, as Ms. Umach has mentioned, in a 1-year time frame, the ESG grant has provided emergency sheltering to 214 individuals, and pretty much on any given night, that's 2 families with children. Of those 214, 64% are verifiably disabled, and another 64% also report a mental health issue. 31%, or roughly 1/3, have been victims of domestic violence in the past. If the agreements for CityNet and Project Touch are approved, it will allow the city to continue the successful homeless services program that has allowed the city to reach its goal of functional zero homelessness, or a shelter placement for anyone agreeing to move towards housing sustainability. In conclusion, city staff, the Murrieta Police Department, and the city's nonprofit partners have been working extraordinarily hard to provide solutions to the homeless crisis and ensure our residents and businesses are not adversely impacted. Additionally, acceptance of the federal grant will allow 5 cities in Southwest Riverside County to work towards a regional homeless action plan to ensure one city isn't overly burdened. Murrieta would lead this effort. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'll remain for any questions.
Okay, just a couple of questions with respect to that. So the decision can't be made on transferring the funding until we make a decision when it comes back, or can we make that decision and then approve the contract separately?
You can do the funding first.
Okay, so that was my concern because it sounds like there's a need to necessitate that now.
Correct.
All right, so then last but not least, when we referred to a regional effort, I remember when we gave you marching orders and you were coming back that we would get an update on who's participating with the regional effort now regarding this. So is there an update on that, Mr. Ambrose?
Correct. So we received confirmation that we were allowed to start spending the federal grant, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago. In that time, we've reached out to the other cities. We've set up our first initial meeting with those cities on November 14th. So it's upcoming in 2 weeks.
Okay, and so the funds that you'll be allocating will be predicated on their participation?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page. All right, Councilmember Warren.
If I could just ask you, could you list those cities that you will be meeting with?
That's City of Temecula, Menifee, Wildemar, and Lake Elsinore.
And Murrieta. So
Correct.
there's a total of 5 of us, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was a great report. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stone.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Brian.
Councilmember White.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for the report and all you do.
Thank you.
Mayor. Oh. What's that?
Thank you so much. Great report. Thank you so much for everything. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for making us look amazing and smart enough to put you in the right position to get this done. I know how much you've done to do this, and we're greatly appreciative. So on this, we're looking for a motion to approve transfer of those funds at this time, Madam City Attorney. Would that be appropriate? Okay. So I'm looking for a motion and a second, please, on staff recommendation. Oh, public comments on the item?
We received that already.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure.
Yes, thank you.
Aye.
So just so I'm clear, so we're just doing one motion right now, which is to approve the
Right, and they'll bring back the contract for approval later on, but this gets the funds transferred so that we're not holding up the process.
Let me make a
We have new contracts prepared that are month to month that,
Oh, so it will be a month to month.
yes.
So
if you
then we
approve
can go
those
ahead and
tonight.
make the motion predicated on the fact that you've already approved the month-to-month contract.
Mhm.
And you'll bring those back still for council to take a look at in the future so we can see them? Perfect. Does anybody have a problem with that? We have a consensus on that?
Yep, let's move forward.
All right, there we go.
Okay, so this will be a motion and a second for as amended by Mr. Ambrose, and with the council's consensus, correct?
Correct.
Okay, if you can go ahead and make that motion. A motion and a second, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose.
Councilmember White? Motion carries unanimously as amended.
Okay. Okay, so that puts us on public hearings, and that's adoption of the 2022 building and fire codes. Are there any members that like who wish to speak or abstain from this item at this time?
I don't see any abstentions from council.
Okay, there we go. Seeing no one, let's have staff start the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Just by way of background, the state of California updates what are collectively known as the building standards codes. So essentially, those are the consist of 12 parts, and they are essentially the codes against which the city reviews new construction. So the process, it's a little bit different than our typical public hearings. So tonight we're conducting the first reading, and then we're asking you to schedule the second reading, the public hearing and adoption for the November 15th City Council meeting. So happy to have with me this evening Andy Cruz, our senior buildings plans examiner, and also Adria Reinertson, our fire marshal, to explain the local amendments that are proposed, as well as the adoption process in general. So I'll hand it over to Andy.
Thank you, David.
Excuse me, gentlemen. I apologize. So I had spoken with the city manager and the city attorney on this. This is a really big lift when we started looking at this and all the information that's provided here. And I think there are some things that I feel and my colleagues don't know about, or I'm not 100% sure that they do, that could have significant impacts on approving this. And I think this should come back to the council for a workshop so that everybody's informed, because there is a lot of data and a lot of information here. And I don't know that, after public comment, I think I would look for consensus from the council to create a workshop so that this can be addressed and some of the issues that can be addressed publicly on this. So I'll bring it back to my colleagues for any input.
Mr. Mayor, may I interject really quick just before you make the vote? So just in terms of the timing, just wanted to make sure that the council is aware. The state building codes will become effective January 1st, whether or not the council takes any action. It would be the local amendments that are proposed as part of the update that would not become effective. Just wanted to make that clarification for you.
So, but the state amendments are going to move forward no matter what. There are some local amendments that I'm concerned with, certainly. And I think those are the things that need to be addressed prior to, I think the council needs to be aware of those. And anybody that knows me that's been here over an 8-year period with me knows I don't like workshops. But I think this is something that escalates to the level of having a workshop so that all the expertise comes in and we understand the feedback from the community as well as the impact to the city in the future on some of these items that are included in there. Because again, there's quite a few items.
Of course.
So on that note, what's the council's leisure? Councilmember Warren, Councilor.
Sorry. I just have a question. With respect to your presentation tonight, is it going to go through all of the changes that are going to be made? And I was told that it was actually the fire codes were more stringent than they will be with these new codes. Is that correct assumption or am I wrong?
So I'll defer to the chief and fire marshal.
And by the way, hello, it's nice to see you in person.
Welcome
to Murrieta.
Appreciate that. Could you repeat your question for me one more time, please?
I'm just saying, will this presentation go through all of the changes? And are these changes less lenient than the fire code that will be approved on January 1st?
Okay.
Or more stringent?
The presentation doesn't go through every change. The majority of the change to the fire code ordinance was cleanup, so we didn't go through all of that. When you amend the state fire and building codes, we can only amend them to be more restrictive than the state code that is coming out January 1st.
Okay. And because alluding to the mayor, some of these in rural areas will be very difficult. For example, requiring DG to go to paving or cement.
Specifically 15-24-130 section 202 general definitions. There's a great deal of impact to that, and after the mayor pro tem is finished, then I'll elaborate on what I'm concerned with.
Will you be all right, where was I? Will you be alluding, Chief?
I'll take this, yes. I think we know that fire access is a major part of the fire code, and the state code uses all-weather surfaces. That is part of our presentation. Currently, we have a more stringent code than the state. The existing municipal code for the fire code in the city of Murrieta is more stringent than the state code, and that we require some sort of permanent hard surface such as pavement. We are, in this fire code adoption, amending that for rural areas where we won't be requiring that. It will be up to the discretion of the fire marshal for access to, I believe it's up to 2 homes, because the difference of what we need to bring to that fire in the form of fire suppression is different than, say, an apartment complex built in the downtown portion of the city. We have different access requirements. And to use one broad stroke of the code, we understand that that's a little bit limiting. But we do have how we'll be covering that in this presentation. If we want to single this out specifically and talk about it, I'm totally fine to talk about how we're doing that. I just want to know if we're going to move on with the process, or do we want to pull this separately out and just talk about fire access?
I think that there's more than that one issue within this process. There are multiple levels of this as I went through and started reading, and I read it 4 times. And there's some complicated issues that will have impacts when you look at the fact that we're getting ready to do suppression improvements in regions of the city that are the roads that we will be taking over and adopting, and we can probably include city engineering on that in the workshop, what the impact's going to be to those, because those roads are rural roads. We also, Chief, prior to you coming here, had the rural road amendment that we had done regarding the Miller property in Los Alamos. That was the whole policy amendment. And Mr. Maley, do you remember that? Do you have a recollection of that and what happened with that driveway and access at that time?
I have recollection of that one property,
Yes. So, I mean, I think that's something that should be brought out in a workshop. We should have this discussion to figure it out, because there are a lot of different issues that are going with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, understand.
Mr. Mayor, should there be a focus on whether to have the workshop or move forward with the item?
I would certainly like that. That's why I made the motion to see if we had consensus. But
well, yeah, there wasn't a second.
Discussing, the chief asked a question, so I'm responding to his question.
Usually there's a second and then a discussion. And if I could just add, some of the council members are new. This is something that's done every 3 years, and it's required by the state. The state adopts uniform building codes, and then they come before you. And so, as was said, a lot of this is required by the state, and there's only a little that we have
allude to the fact that the rest of the council understand that there are stuff that's outside the code that's included in here that we're having the discussion on now. This is not strictly the state imposing this update.
Well, right. As explained in the report, there are some minor local amendments that you're allowed to make it more restrictive.
Okay. Yes, please.
I just have a question. So Chief, what you just alluded to was that the Murrieta codes are actually a little bit more stringent than the current fire codes. Is that correct? So this is going to address to move the code back down to the current fire code. Is that what you said?
The fire code, I wish we had it here. It's this thick.
Right.
So it's a giant document. We adopt that. Then we make revisions to that in our own municipal code that are more stringent in some regards based on the specific topography and the findings of your area. So we have a municipal code that is a little bit more stringent than the fire code in some areas, and then just adopts the fire code in some areas. The code we're bringing forward tonight rolls back some of those more stringent things that exist already in the municipal code within the city. So with fire access as an example, there's another access with road widths in commercial areas, and another example with what we describe as a mid-rise building and some constraints that go into a mid-rise building. So we're coming back down on some of those more stringent fire code adoptions that we have had over the past 3 years. I think road access is one that road access is very tough, because in the fire code you get one shot at it. You don't have every single possible kind of development spelled out in road access. So it makes sense in some areas, and then it seems stringent in other areas.
All right. I'm just very concerned with rural residential, that now we're adding something that is, to ask somebody, that's just building a new house to actually take their gravel driveway to a cement driveway or a asphalt driveway sometimes is cost prohibitive for them to do that. So I'm just wondering, with respect to that.
For clarification, right now in our municipal code for the city, rural homes are required to pave their driveways. In the new fire code that we're bringing forward, rural homes, it's at the discretion of the fire official. So we will look at it on a case-by-case basis and not blanket say you must pave it, because we're going to require that a neighborhood is completely paved. So it has to do with the fuel load that we'll experience in the fire, and it makes sense that in an apartment complex we can't have a fire engine pumping on dirt or gravel even. But in a rural home setting, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. That's one of the things we're being more lenient on in this code adoption cycle.
All right. I personally would love to hear what you have to say tonight to educate myself as we go forward. If my colleagues concur with me, and I appreciate the position of the mayor and being so diligent in reading through the document, which was a bit confusing. I'm hoping that you bring some light to the document that was presented to us.
Okay, just for clarification, the reason that I'm asking for a workshop is when I look at 1524-140, section 304-1 and 2, it talks about the amended vegetation, weed, grass, vine. That's specific to what you're talking about when a fire marshal goes out or you're going out to look at that. And that may impact my driveway or my property or somebody else's property predicated on what somebody else has done with maintenance, whether they've done their maintenance or not, if I have a neighbor that isn't in compliance. That's one of the concerns, and thank you for shaking your head. Yes, Fire Marshal, I appreciate that. The next thing is when we talk about amendments here, where I'm a little concerned, I've counted up to 5, Chief, that are more stringent than the states when I went through it and started reviewing it. And just a couple. One of the things that I'm concerned with is that I don't have a process that where I go, I know that if I'm at 90% compaction, and I understand the caveat of if it rains and something's damaged, that somebody has to be diligent in protecting that driveway and that surface. But I know from experience as a builder that I can have at 90% compaction, and as long as I've maintained that, it'll handle that 75,000 pounds. Correct statement?
I think correct statement, and the concern with compaction in roads and the surfaces that we are bringing our fire apparatus on is not only the weather, but also the fact that when we're doing suppression efforts, such as pumping, if you're set up pumping and you have water flowing out, because no fire engine is perfectly watertight, there's a lot of water that comes out of these apparatus as we pump them, we can actually be eroding the surface underneath our apparatus. So if you have a truck company sitting there that's 70,000 pounds and you are eroding away your floor underneath you where you're pumping from, that's part of the concerns of access. So access is not only about the weather surface, but really the suppression efforts that we bring. So then you have to look at the time of suppression efforts, which is going to be very different for a single family home in a rural setting than it would be if we had a commercial fire going. So that's why we made the distinction between a rural setting, a single family home or 2 homes off of one driveway, than we would in an apartment complex, say, or an apartment complex that's under construction, because that's really a highly susceptible time for ignition.
Okay, I'll let my colleague speak and then I'll finish up.
Warren, I do have a question. We would be voting on this as a whole. We couldn't pull anything out of it, correct? It's all or nothing. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
My understanding is we vote to move it forward, but it's in public comment. So we take consideration of the public comment that's provided during this time. And when we come back, we can make revisions, I believe.
It can be revised. You guys have a lot of questions, and so maybe you should have the presentation and then be able to open the public hearing, have a conversation, and then decide at that time if you want to continue it or have a workshop.
Consensus from the council. Councilmember Stone.
I'd like to go ahead and hear the presentation tonight, and if I'm not comfortable with casting my vote, and then I'm going to ask for us to move to a workshop. I think the information will be vital whether we move forward or not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember White.
I concur with Mayor Pro Tem's approach, the city attorney's approach, and Councilmember Stone's suggestion.
Okay, so I guess we move forward then.
Just go slow, please.
Thank you. So I will be presenting on the 2022 California Building Codes as what is being proposed to add and amend for Title 15 of the Murrieta Municipal Code. As was stated earlier, the California Building Standards will become effective January 1st, 2023, regardless if we make any amendments or changes. The California Building Standards Code is known as the California Code of Regulations, Title 24. The current ordinance, 55 552-19 was adopted by Council November 5th of 2019 and is updated every 3 years. State law allows local amendments to the California Building Standards Code, administrative and building code standards, and may not be less restrictive than what the state codes that are adopted. Amendments are based on the local topographical, geological, climatic, and environmental conditions, and must be approved by the local decision-making authority. Local jurisdictions are required to enforce adopted California Building Standard Codes. The California Building Standard Codes apply statewide with or without the local amendments. The summary of adoptions are reinstating of a currently approved Board of Appeals, which consists of building industrial members, construction industry professionals, and representatives. And this should say establish of a swimming pool enclosure requirement. The swimming pool enclosure requirement was in the California Building Codes historically and was removed with the California Swimming Pool Safety California Health and Safety Code Swimming Pool Act. We are recommending to add a new restrictive requirement, which is subsection S of Chapter 31 of the California Building Codes, which currently lists that 2 of the 7 items listed in the Health and Safety Code are required for drowning prevention features. We are amending it to require the pool barrier, which is item number 1 of the Health and Safety Code, to be a required item. The second pool drowning prevention feature can be one of the 6 remaining features. So the barrier would be a fence that is enclosing the pool, separating it from either the main house or from your neighbor's house. So it would be a 5-foot tall fence that goes completely around the pool area and would have a fence or would have a gate that is self-closing, latching, that exits away from the pool. So if something was to happen, you have direct access out of the pool area, but the pool enclosure, the fence, would be a required item out of the 7 drowning prevention features listed in the health and safety. Currently, the property does not have to be fenced to have a pool. There is no fencing requirement. Currently, a person could use 2 of any of the 7 drowning prevention features, and a barrier would not be a required feature under the current code.
Is one of the 7 features. I don't see one of the 7 listed here for us. So
yes, so the 7 pool drowning prevention features, as listed in the Health and Safety Code, number 1 is an enclosure that isolates a swimming pool or spa from a private single-family home. Number 2 is a removable mesh fence that meets the ASTM, the American Society for Testing Materials standards, in conjoined with a gate that is self-closing and latching and can be key lockable. Number 3 is an approved safety pool cover that is defined in a sub-related section. Number 4 is exit alarms applied to the single-family residential home's doors or direct access into the swimming pool area. Number 5 is a self-closing and self-latching device with a release mechanism no lower than 54 inches above the floor for any doors that provide direct access in the swimming pool area. Number 6 is an alarm when placed in the pool and spa will sound a detection upon accidental activation. It's a splash alarm. Somebody falls in, it triggers it. And number 7 is other means that is of a protection degree that affords the same features and has been tested by either ASTM or the Associated Society of Mechanical Engineers.
Thank you so
those
much.
are the 7 features.
Thank you.
This is for new pool builds, correct? Not existing?
This would be for new pools in a residential environment. So in a commercial environment, there's other standards.
And this is recommended by the state, or is this recommended by you?
This is recommended by me, and it is in conjunction with what other municipalities local to us, neighboring to us, have already adopted in the 2019 codes.
With regards to the alarm splash, is that manual? So when you're having guests over and you're jumping in the pool, that thing's not going to be going off?
It's a
You pull it.
removable
Yeah.
device.
Okay.
So the door alarms can be removed, the pool splash alarms removed, the temporary fencing can be removed. So a lot of the features after install can be removed by homeowners and provide no protection once inspections have been performed. So with this amendment to include the pool safety barrier, it is a permanent feature that would remain on site all the time, and it would be a permanent drowning prevention feature. So drowning is the leading cause for death of children ages 1 through 4, second only to natural birth defects. So it is the leading cause of death for children ages 1 through 4. Backyard swimming pools account for over half the deaths of children aged 0 to 5 every year. 2/3 of the drownings occur between May and August. As a jurisdiction and city that has above average temperatures, we have a high propensity for pools, which is why we are recommending this amendment. And then lastly, boys are 2 times more likely to drown in a pool than girls. Staff recommendation is to conduct the first reading of the proposed ordinance adding and amending portions of Title 15 of the Murrieta Municipal Code, adopting the 2022 edition of the California Building Standards Code, and adopting a mandatory swimming pool drowning prevention feature by requiring an approved swimming pool enclosure for certain residential swimming pools. And I will turn it over to Fire for their presentation.
Okay, so the 2022 California Fire Code adoption, I do want to kind of reiterate a couple things as we go through here, and I'll try to do it as slowly as possible. I tend to speak a little fast. It is very common for jurisdictions to amend their fire code package. I just want everybody to be aware that these are model codes that are done at a national level, and then the state of California adopts them, making minimal amendments for the state itself, and then the locals make their amendments after that. So it's generally, the fire code packages are usually a lot longer than the building code packages, just because of the items that the fire code deals in. So let's jump into this. So the 2022 California Fire Code is based on the 2021 International Fire Code with California state amendments. Local amendments are allowed on the basis of topographical, geological, and climatic conditions. And as we've discussed, the effective date of the state codes is January 1st, 2023. Okay, so we're going to jump into the summary of changes. You may note that this package looks a lot different than the last one. And I did mention that we did a lot of cleanup of the language. And we actually did delete quite a bit of amendments that the state or the national code had caught up with that were no longer necessary in our package. We also did a lot of reorganization. The codes themselves changed a lot. So the numbering changed a lot. So probably 85% of this package is already in the current municipal code as is. The other pieces, we're going to emphasize what we made substantive changes to. Okay, so first on the list is access. So 50321, which is the language that we've been talking about, that's not right. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. 50321, in the current municipal code, we require a 28-foot access road on commercial and multifamily developments, on new projects. We have reduced that to 26 feet. And the 24-foot remains for the residential projects. 50323 is the alternative surfaces. What we did with this, 50323 is our existing language for the surface of road widths, which read, just so that we're clear. So the existing section that's in the municipal code reads, fire apparatus access roads shall be designed and maintained to support the imposed loads of fire apparatus at 75,000 pounds and shall be hard surface, paved, or concrete and suitable for fire apparatus. Pervious pavers may be used when designed, installed, and maintained to hold the imposed loads, fire apparatus at 75,000 pounds, and are approved by the fire code official. What we did with this, the change in this section, is we added a caveat for your rural environments, for your access to not more than 2 single-family dwellings within the rural areas. Now, you will note, if you're tracking with me here, the word urban in that last sentence is supposed to be rural. So that is a cleanup that we will make and bring back to you in the next round. Okay.
Can we read that? The rest of it?
Oh, the actual language.
The actual
Yes.
language.
Yes. So what we added to it was alternative surfaces may be considered by the fire code official when serving not more than 2 dwelling units in a rural area. Okay, and then 50. Yes, sir.
The question now becomes, if you have one common driveway that is sharing access, or somebody has an easement that has multiple residents on that property that share common access, how would they deal with that?
We have to take that case by case. And what we're looking at is a driveway that would be to 2 homes, not necessarily a road that would lead to multiple driveways. The point of this is that we're trying to allow the rural areas to look and feel rural still. But if you want to develop a new neighborhood, we don't intend for those roads to be left. We don't want to leave a provision in the code that lets you make a dirt street in the city of Murrieta that has multiple houses off of it. But we want to leave that, the ability to have the rural community still be rural.
I'll address that after.
Okay. Okay, so 50361 is addition of a provision for remote automatic gate openers. The provision states new motorized gates shall be provided with means to be automatically opened remotely by emergency vehicles. We're actually already doing this. We're just adding it to the code.
And that would be a strong feature.
Yes.
They're trying to actually encourage you to get rid of the
They have gotten a little up there, haven't they?
So would this be for new build or would
retroactive?
Retroactive?
Obviously, it was retroactive.
They would be for new gates.
This is an old gate.
Right.
So it's either a new gate or if you're reinstalling or updating your gate.
Yeah, or if you're putting in.
Because when
a
we
new
did the
gate.
updates on the gates in certain communities that I was engaged with, we actually had to do that update at that time. So.
Okay, so I'm confused. Would you have to comply with this now?
Well, I already had to comply with that because it was already in the code.
Okay.
I had to have a Knox box.
I think we're talking about 2 different things here. The fire department, it has long been in the code. I don't know when Murrieta adopted it. We could do that research. The fire department has to have access to your property if you have a gate. That's the Knox box. What we're saying is that with new installed gates, we want the automatic gate opening as part of that to, improve that response. Because what happens as we move to, a city that will be getting help, say we have a vegetation fire behind your home. You may not be getting a Murrieta fire engine that's coming to your house, so they won't have our Knox key because Knox keys are geographical. They're to each municipality. So the way the fire code is working in the future is all fire engines have, we'll call it the Opticom. We're saying automatic, but it's because we don't want to give a trade name in there. There's automatic gate opening that we have built into our its traffic preemption systems. That will mean that the gate can open for any fire engine, whomever it may be, that actually shows up to protect your home in that situation or provide medical services. So this is not, the standard of the Knox key has been there for a long time. This is for new construction. Yes.
Okay, another change that we made is to the mid-rise ordinance. The city has had the mid-rise ordinance for some time now. It took effect when a building was 4 stories or more in height. We have changed that to be a little bit more development friendly, especially since we're seeing a lot of multifamily coming in through the entitlement process, and they tend to be higher density and multi-story. So we changed the mid-rise ordinance to be required for buildings 5 stories or more in height. So the requirements themselves within the mid-rise ordinance aren't changing, but our definition of mid-rise changed from 4 stories to 5 stories. Okay, and with that, those were the key pieces that we made actual technical changes to within the ordinance. So our recommendation is to conduct the first reading of a proposed ordinance, adopting the California Fire Code 2022 edition based on the 2021 International Fire Code with certain amendments, additions, and deletions, and repealing Chapter 15.24 of the Murrieta Municipal Code in its entirety and replacing with a new Chapter 15.24.
Does that also include 1524, 160, 307-6 that you added regarding fire pits and the other things that we're looking at and fire rings that may be existing?
Those are those amendments. Yeah, it is everything within 15.24.
So in that one, outdoor fireplaces, fire pits, fire rings, and similar devices used in Group R occupancies, outdoor fireplaces, fire pits, fire rings, or similar exterior devices shall comply with this section. Would you elaborate on that section? Gas fuel devices, where prohibited, outdoor fireplaces, because this does impact existing applications.
Is that only for new builds, though?
That's my question.
Can you repeat the section?
Yeah, if you just go down, it's devices, Chief. It's under, you can start at section 1524, 170, which is section 307-6-1. That's added gas fuel devices, which covers fire pits, fire rings, similar devices fueled by natural gas, liquid petroleum or otherwise. Because then it gets into also burning pits, which we have a lot of problems with. And, you know, I understand how ash travels. We're well aware of casting. And that's been a concern because it's been a concern that we've dealt with before. But then that gets into an implementation and how to enforce that too.
Sure.
When you actually put this in place.
I have to look, and we do have to apologize. Usually we would come forward with a red line version of this code. This was a complete rewrite of the code because so many chapters, so many numbers changed. So a red line, it was next to impossible to say we've crossed this out.
Hence the request for a workshop. It made more sense to me than doing this to you tonight.
We totally understand, and I apologize. Hopefully going forward, we're able to just do a red line and show the changes that we make. I believe this exists in our current municipal code. So though it shows as a revision, it's because this doesn't exist in the state code. It already does exist in the Murrieta municipal code. So a lot of these are revisions that already exist in the code. The things we've done this year has not become more stringent. It's become more lenient to fall in line with the state code because the state code also, the state borrows from the municipalities. As we said, the International Fire Code becomes the state fire code. There's always a lag on everything, and then it becomes municipals. And there's a reason they do it every 3 years, because the state goes back, the federal government goes back, and they look at what's making sense, what are our communities doing. So they reach out to the municipalities and they take what exists in our codes. We're not the only city doing this right now. There are probably many council meetings going on right now having the same conversation we are at this time. So they take these codes from the municipals and they add them back to the code. We then take them out of our revisions because now it's part of the state code. That just starts making the chaptering go away.
So where I'm concerned, 307-6-2 added, where prohibited, the burning of wood and other solid fuels shall not be conducted within very high fire hazard areas and severity, right?
Right.
Do we define that? Do we have a map? Do we clarify
Yes.
that? Where is it? I've lived in this city for a long time and I've never seen it.
So it is on the city website. The fire hazard severity map is provided by state law by the state of California. That's CAL FIRE provides that map. It's called the FRAP map.
Mm-hmm.
It's released. It's supposed to be released every 5 years. It hasn't been released. I want to say 2008. 2008 was the last time. We're expecting another revision. This is a map that we use a lot of basis in the fire service. The fire industry uses this map a lot. In fact, in Murrieta, we do our defensible space inspections in the very high fire severity zones of the local area, of the municipal area of Murrieta. And then that map also dictates, realtors are very familiar with it right now because after AB 38, everyone has to get a defensible space inspection as part of their escrow process. So it's that same map that's used widely throughout many different.
But is that regional? Because that's where we have the difference. Like in Greer Ranch, when somebody was burning something or had an issue, you get a call and it's either going to roll to PD or when you're looking at the enforcement mechanism on it, it's like everything else we seem to do, which is complaint driven, right? And I think this is a little different. PD is reactive, we're proactive.
Sure.
Right? So how do you apply that?
I would say with outdoor burning's tough because it has to be reactive. We can't, we can tell people you can't outdoor burn. We're doing that by adopting this in the municipal code. However, we can't be there before they're burning. So we have to wait. It's a reactive thing.
Right.
Now, enforcement, a lot of times when we go out, it's education because people don't know they can't have a bonfire in their backyard. There's a lot of people that don't know that. And that's not regulated by just the fire code. That's actually regulated by Air Quality Management District, and there's a lot of other considerations in that. This is just the fire code we're talking about.
See, and there you just hit the nail on the head. That's the confusion because you get that from AQMD. This is a burn day, and this is not. And people go, oh, it's okay. They're saying it's okay to do it, so there's conflicting information.
Well, it is okay to do it in areas that have outdoor burning permitted, and outdoor burning permitted in specific areas and specific fire codes varies.
But when we say national and state, Chief, that's constituting that I have faith that the state is doing the right stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not 100% convinced that they do. What I'm more worried about is one, how do we implement it? Two, how do we go through and go, okay, this is how you report it if that's the case. And here's the crux of it. Where's the teeth to this so that when they do it, that we get to enforce it and go, you know what, we won't be doing that again because there was a penalty for it.
Absolutely. I'm going to be honest, I haven't dealt with that with our PD partners yet, but I'm happy to have that conversation about our enforcement of illegal burning in the city. I've been here through the summer. Most people don't do it in the middle of the summer.
Right.
Because, common sense keeps people from starting bonfires in the summer here. But I imagine as we come into winter, we'll see it more.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Councilmember Warren? No? Councilmember White?
No question.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone?
Thank you. With 15.24.30, section 202 states all weather surface definition was added, but it doesn't include impacted DG. Can you explain why?
Lori, what was that on?
15.24.24.130, section 202.
Is that the state's?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the added general definitions, the all-weather surface. That was the one that I was referring to on the 75,000-pound fire apparatus
Sure.
that you were alluding to, that if you had pumping action or you may have hydraulicing going on, that
Right.
it could undermine and embed into that.
I think there's a lot of surfaces that could be considered all weather that aren't in here. We would have to see engineered studies case by case on those. The state does not define it in their model code.
Another
That's one of-
reason for
one
the
of the
workshop,
issues.
right? Because when I look at it, Chief, what it says is asphalt, concrete, or approved pavers that will support imposed load of 75,000 pounds. We know that there's a multitude of options that you can compact DG and have a gravel base on top of it, and that would help with the prevention of erosion. And everything I read with respect to implementation of this had to do with flooding and water exposure and the other things. And I got it. We do get rain here, but it's not that much.
Yeah.
So again, we go, okay, we look at this situation, we go for existing and or applications that may not have that type of access, we go, we'll make the exception, but there's a process you're going to have to follow by getting it inspected, verifying that it's being done. And by the way, there's a cost associated with that because we have to send somebody out to do it. And then that's, it making sure, and then there's a consequence if they don't. But again, there's also an impact to us on roads that may not be withdrawn to public use that haven't had improvements yet, where, you can't say do as we say, not as we do. So that's twofold there. And I think that's what we need to be looking at and going, no, if we're going to do it, we do the same process, right? Because it also got into the rolled curve in the flow line, which I found really interesting because I think with the flow line and the curb, there's a very specific reason for that because it does give you your guidance going up on the driveway when you're taking an apparatus up there. So, and again, as a builder, to me, it was like to pour that 6-inch curb was worth its weight in gold because it gave some type of alert to what was going on when that truck is moving up that driveway.
Sure. I understand access being a big issue here. And I know that historically the reason is access is a big issue in the city of Murrieta is we had a situation where we had an apartment complex under construction and our apparatus got stuck.
Yep.
Because we did not have paved roadways. We did not have, there was a state approved all-weather surface that doesn't become it's not all weather when you have a 70,000-pound truck on top of it with water coming out of it. And so we had an apparatus stuck on a fire. And if you had to reposition or anything, that pumping apparatus is out of the game. That's the historic why apparatus has been, brought forward here. And I think a lot of municipalities, once they learn, they adopt similar situations.
I'm sorry.
In that situation, that was just one incident, correct?
Correct.
So we're going to change all this based on one incident.
Well, I mean, this is historic. This was changed before. We're not arguing to change. This is already in the municipal code. The question here is, are we rolling it back?
With all due respect, when you say it's historic, there was a small blurb on this on an update that we see annually or every 2 years. This was far greater detail, which I like because it created that transparency, and I greatly appreciate you doing that because it brought some. I'll give you another example that, and most people aren't acute to this unless you have to put those signs up, and on buildings, those larger signs that we're requiring on an existing building, and it says existing in the verbiage to update them. Mm-hmm. Those are extraordinarily expensive.
Address.
Yeah, some of them are $600, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 for those. And when I first experienced this, when I first got on council, I was like, well, that's pretty substantial to actually have to enforce retroactively. And so that would be on an existing structure. So again, is there latitude on that? Is it something that you impose right away? Is it something that we can even realistically enforce? I mean,
I have another question. So I'm understanding your recommendation is for driveways to be concrete versus crushed granite, the the DG, so you want to get rid of that and have in the rural area concrete for access roads. Am
Concrete
I understanding
pavers.
that correctly?
No, it's concrete, pavers, or asphalt is what's suggested on the
Okay.
all-weather
And,
surface.
and to be clear, that's what's in the fire code in the city of Murrieta today.
Okay.
So that's the existing fire code says concrete, pavers, permeous pavers, or asphalt. The recommendation we've made for the rural area is, as it read, if it's a driveway accessing one or two homes, alternative surfaces can be approved by the fire official. That's the effort of us to roll back some of this. We understand that there's a reason you want pavement in an apartment complex. It makes sense. There's especially under construction, it's a very heavy fuel load that will require a lot of suppression efforts. A single family home doesn't have that same heavy suppression efforts. If it's a big home, we have to take that into consideration. But we're trying to give people the ability to keep the rural parts of the city rural on those single family homes, but not if somebody was going to build an apartment complex in the rural areas, we're going to want concrete pavement or impervious pavement.
So how do you avoid when somebody, and I guess it's subjective, but if I'm looking going, okay, I'm getting ready to build a home and I look to the right and I have somebody who's got a huge fuel load that doesn't have a maintained fuel mod. Then I look to the left and I have somebody that's moderate. Then I got a guy in behind me that's got 15 sheds on his property full of content. I mean, that's certainly going to impact your decision on my driveway in the future or what I'm doing.
Driveway or fuel modification?
Driveway, because if it's left specific without going, okay, here are the parameters. What's the stop an individual from saying, now, you know what, until your neighbors clean up their property, you can't do this. We're not going to allow it because we may need to defend their property from your driveway.
Sure.
It's a fair question, Chief.
It's a fair question, and that's where we have to look at discretion in the code and having responsible people to exercise that discretion. And with our fire marshal and our fire chief, I think we have to be responsible to the person developing the property, but also the neighbors and the neighboring areas.
Okay.
And we're trying. We have parts of our city that are still rural and parts that are commercial, very urban, and making one fire code with a different line for every possible address is difficult. So we do have to build some discretion into the fire code to exercise common sense and common current fire practices into them. Our apparatus were very different 50 years ago. That's why the fire code looks very different than it did 50 years ago.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mhm.
I appreciate the rollback to rural. I know in West Murrieta there are a lot of gravel driveways, a lot of DG packed driveways serving two homes. I think that is very positive, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you moving things from 26 to 24 with the requirements.
28 to 26.
That's correct.
To fall in
28
line
to 26, right?
with the state
with
code.
The residential remaining and
Yep.
not being changed at 24. Sorry, misspoke. I like the fact that you're raising to 5 stories, and I like that we're being a little bit more development friendly with these codes, because reading through these codes, they are very difficult to even think of. We have an outdoor fireplace. We have that burns wood that's been there since we bought the house, and there's a lot of caveats here that would really be not a good thing for a lot of existing homes that have clear space, etc. So the only thing that I'm want to make sure that a lot of these things are not, these are all new build issues. These are not going back, and you're not going to start citing somebody that has an outdoor fireplace that's burning wood on a burn day in their outdoor fireplace.
Are they cooking? I have to look at that. Our code specifically on the spark arresters. The subject of outdoor burning, that is not necessarily just like what they're burning in, but what are they burning and everything else. That's where we get into the enforcement, and I would have to read that section of the code very carefully.
Okay.
There's also a provision in the state fire code about nuisance burning. Is it, is it a nuisance? Is it somebody cooking? There are differences, and again, you have to look at the code.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the burning that you should be concerned with. It's the problem is when you have a property that may be used multi-use or have a commercial use, such as a farm or a ranch, and you have access or you want to build an auxiliary structure, that structure now becomes applicable to that new code. It's not exempt. So that means if you build a barn on your property and your driveway does not meet that requirement,
right?
or, well, the ADU, let's talk about that if it's more than one. So that's what I'm saying. There has to be, this is more than just sitting and having a conversation about what I already agree with them about. What I'm saying is let's lay it out and go, look, we can agree that we have to cover
Jonathan,
pools.
we're rolling it back.
No, you're not rolling it back, because when you look at this and you look at the surfaces here, it's rolled back the way it's happening, where you go, okay, it's existing, or it's only going to be two houses that are impacted. If you have a structure that exists and you come in and you have a dirt driveway and you build an additional structure, you've now triggered that. There's no way to stop that. I mean, it's clear.
But we can't go less. We can't.
I'm not saying that you go less, but just expect that you're going to trigger that. And somebody that was approved with a DG driveway is now going to have to pave that report.
But Chief, how could we couldn't circumvent that anyway? That still would occur. Isn't that correct?
If we were just straight at the state code on everything, an all-weather surface, there's a lot of driveways that aren't all-weather surfaces. I mean, just because a bulldozer pushed a driveway in 1950 doesn't make it an all-weather surface. So I imagine through our development process, it would trigger review. But I would say that it would trigger review on a lot of driveways, regardless of what the fire code for access said on that.
So with what Jonathan's saying, can we up that to 3 homes per?
Really, we have to look at what the intent of the language was. The intent of the language was so we didn't have neighborhoods that were built on dirt roads.
Right. Like
right.
Like a cul-de-sac of homes on a dirt road, which we see in the west side.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. We don't want to have our city able to build neighborhoods with dirt roads.
Okay.
But we do want our city to be able to have the rural areas to have dirt roads and dirt access.
But the problem is you already have neighborhoods that are built with dirt roads.
Right. So,
but
it's not going to cause these neighborhoods to have to change
No,
surface.
a lot of this would fall under existing non-conforming of implementation of the fire code. There are certain things, defensible space, for example. Defensible space changes, we change with that. You have, it used to be 30 feet from your home, and now it's 100 feet from your home that you have to take in.
Right.
We don't comply. We don't use existing non-conforming with that. Things like, anytime you do a tenant improvement or something, you may open up to the new fire code. So there are those considerations. For, you have to go into the whole new fire code, though.
Okay.
And just for clarity, that's even on a single family residence that's deciding to build a substructure or a secondary structure.
I would have to work with our development on that specifically, but I know ADUs have some exemptions.
It's not only
I'm not
ADUs,
sure.
it's a barn or storage or a workshop.
I would have to look specifically through the development side.
I do think that needs to be looked at, especially in rural areas. If you build a motorhome garage or a barn, and you certainly don't want to trigger, because you don't want to trigger that we're going to have concrete driveway all around this ranch, which is really, truly not feasible. Right?
I would agree with that. And that's certainly the type of input that we're open to take during.
Okay.
Lisa, I just want to share something with you. This was done in July, where a resident was faced with this with the city, and they wanted them to do a concrete driveway. The low cost of a concrete driveway was $96,000. The average cost is $121,000, and the high cost was $142,000. Doing a gravel driveway, the estimate was $10,000, and with the installation, $14,000 to $35,000. And then the crushed granite, the low end was 12,000 and the high end was 26,000. You're talking about, you know, $100,000 more for concrete. And as Jonathan says, if there was a ADU, if there was a barn, if something, and they come in and they're going to force that resident to put concrete in. Look at Alan's driveway. If you were to do Alan's driveway and you made him do concrete, what would that cost him? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm assuming. And a lot of residents can't afford that. But my understanding is with the compacted DG, as long as it's maintained properly, that it can hold up to 75,000 pounds. Is that correct?
Yes, it's absolutely great. And
Yeah, I mean, we've seen engineering studies saying that.
And Chief, that's where I'm going. If we come in and we say this is what we want, and I'm not necessarily saying, I think we need to afford the option to go, look, I've seen DG that's better known as Dirtcrete, and I think most developers know about it, where you add, I've got 3% calcium chloride mixed on my hill to stabilize the back. You had to use jackhammers to dig trees out with. And it's certainly not moving, and I'm certainly not getting any mudslides, so it's pretty solid. So I guess my question would be, if something like this to be implemented, why don't we put something in place that says, if this is going to happen, if you're using this, and if you're not responsibly maintaining it, here are the consequences.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't that make more sense?
Yeah.
Instead of just going, oh, here it is, and end of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also to piggyback on that, I mean, can't we put the road or whatever, if we are going to build an ADU or I'm going to build another barn or something, we could say in discretion of our fire marshal or our chief, with discretion of our fire department, and give them an appeals process, right? So they can appeal to the city.
That was the next thing I was going to
council.
talk about, is the appeals process and the fee for it.
Yeah, so they could appeal to the city council, because I'm sure there are people out there that, you know, I don't want you not to be able to defend a structure for safety. I don't want a fire in a barn to go crazy because you can't get up the road because it's rained and the road is washed out. Therefore, that is an impossible situation and a very dangerous situation. We do want to put our fire department in any kind of danger. So I understand where this is going, but I also think that maybe we need to have a process that gives a person an option to have a variance. Would that be out of?
No, and I think that we've tried to introduce some variants here that didn't exist before, with that at the discretion. I mean, those words mean a lot. Now, that's in the rural setting, and I think it's important we make this distinction, because the rural setting is different than our commercial areas of the city.
Right.
You know, we're looking at the reality of, like, I don't want to make somebody that has a nice property with a DG driveway pave it. You know, if they're in a rural area, we don't want to make somebody do that. So I think we can certainly look at our code and how we can word around that. But I think the really important distinction to make here is that rural versus the commercial or more urban areas of our city.
But also, even with a new build, just like this gentleman right here, $100,000 difference. And if the DG is working and it does hold up to 75,000 pounds, making him accountable yearly to make sure that there's a certificate of authenticity that says, yes, it has been maintained and it is milled yearly to the fire department. I mean, a lot of these people, if this gentleman, if he had to pay the price for the concrete, he would have to sell his piece of property and not build his dream home. Then I don't think that that's fair either.
But Laura, I think that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you said, that someone like that wants to build their home in a rural area could use the DG.
Okay, that's
He
fine.
could use the DG. I mean, he's going to put in a road to get to his house, right? So
This
he
gentleman
could-
had a fight
Yeah.
for this because the city was demanding him put the concrete, and he went through the code and argued with the city, and finally they succumbed and they allowed him to do that. But again, this is just one incident where this gentleman understands development, and what about those that don't, like me?
And I think though that we're changing the code, like Chief Malloy said, we're actually changing the code for rural areas to not demand pavers or asphalt or concrete. We're actually allowing the DG, and so is that? Am I?
That's correct.
Okay.
We should specify that there are certain engineering aspects to road development as well and access, and that's out of the fire code. But there's certain slopes and cross slopes, and that's not really in the fire code, that may take more engineering and may take a different surface. That has to be understood as well. But so there may be portions of roads that have to be concrete because of how steep they are, or the cross slope, or the runoff, or things like that. There's
So,
a lot
Chief,
that goes into this.
So question for you regarding that, because you just went down the road, no pun intended.
Well done.
With section 5031, where it requires fire apparatus access roads, including private residential driveways, shall be required for every building hereafter constructed within any portion of the exterior wall of the first story is located within 150 feet of the closest point of an approved fire department vehicle access. So let's sit and go, the distance I have on a typical driveway, like in Greer Ranch, is 20 feet, right? 30 feet. What constitutes an access road at that point if I have a driveway that's 600 feet long? And it's still a driveway because it's only going to one residential structure. And I get what you're talking about with regard to the slope and traction. But that's where they should be plateauing that and reducing the grade as they're going up anyhow under older engineering standards, right? So again, and when you say, well, we're reducing it back, that's not what this says. Matter of fact, this is the polar opposite. So the question is, if we're going to afford that option, why wouldn't we build it into the verbiage and say, we're going to afford that option. We're going to give you the option to do DG, but it's based on X, Y, and Z. Would that be fair?
We looked at discretion of the fire official as that, but if we wanted to codify it,
what if I have a fire official that changes in 2 years?
I understand. We could certainly look at how we could codify that.
Yeah, I think that would be a really, really good start to go, look, there are certain criteria that you have here in order to achieve this, and this is what's expected of you. Tell people what they can do, not necessarily what they can't do. I think that's the easier method, in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay.
I just had one more. According to the California building standards, having the pool requirements, currently we have 2 of 7. Why would we want to increase the ordinance? Shouldn't we just maintain what we currently have to give people options for safety? Obviously, according to the California Building and Safety Code, obviously pick 2 out of the 7 is good. So shouldn't we just stay with the original code, which we have, and not demand that somebody conforms to that fence?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Pro Tem. So I think the intent is to ensure that we have the safest type of pool barrier or safety feature, which has proven to be a pool barrier. So it was just by way of history, prior to, I think it was 2018 is when the Swimming Pool Safety Act became effective. The building code actually required a fence as a barrier to a pool. So the state changed the regulations to give people the menu of options. And so given the drowning statistics that Andy mentioned, so staff was recommending that we go back to the way state code was prior to 2018, which is to require the barrier.
But state code changed in 2018 to allow the choice, right? Between
Correct.
1 and 7.
Correct.
All right. because there may be some incidences that a fence won't work where a different type of barrier will work, and with some different, pools in different areas, etc. So that's all I would say is I understand drowning. I have had a next door neighbor's baby drowned and did CPR on that baby for 7 minutes, longest 7 minutes of my life. They had nothing. So, I understand what you were saying about not being able to take the fence down. But I do think that I'm into, not government overreach and giving people a choice 1 through 7, just personally.
Okay, so any other questions from my colleagues at this time? All right, Madam City Clerk, speakers.
Just so I'm clear, so are we going to open up the public hearing now? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, let's go ahead and
Okay.
open it. Well, and I guess we're just going to go, then we'll make a decision how we're going to move forward at the end. Is that the consensus we have from everyone?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yes, let's go ahead and open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. If I could please have Mr. Alan Long. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Long has requested 6 minutes and Faye Wands has donated her time if it is.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 2 items that hit close home to me is one talking about the pool fences, and you heard some statistics that I can vouch for in my career as a firefighter. The other one is, you may not notice, but it gets real hot out here. So there's a lot of pools, like the statistic said. My testimony is going to be whether you not choose or recommend which 1 through 7 or 2 of those you choose, but to make sure you do what's safest for our community. One thing I want to shed light on is I have seen too many to remember, too many to count. And what I remember most is, you may think that these people need to take responsibility for their children. Maybe they need to watch their children more. Maybe they were irresponsible, but I'm telling you, in my experience, it's not. When you look at the families who have children who drown, it's like I'm looking in a mirror. These are responsible parents. They're accidents for a reason. A sibling opens up the slider door and they don't realize it. I had a close call myself with my 1.5-year-old on our boat. He was with arm's reach of me, and I turned to get an ice chest, and without any noise whatsoever, I turn around, he's gone in the water. It's an accident. It's called an accident for a reason. So I don't see this as far-reaching. We're one of the safest cities in the nation for a very long time, and I suggest we keep it that way. So I would advocate for that very reason. We have a lot of responsible parents in Murrieta, and accidents can happen to them as well. The second one is the road access. Obviously, I'm in a rural area. I can think of 3 projects right now where applications are in place that this would affect. Mind you, I do want to point out that the chief and the fire marshal, breath of fresh air. I hear your intent, and I believe they have good intentions, and I hear their discretion falls exactly in line with what I think you're saying and what I would want. But there's a little bit of a problem with it, whether they have good discretion or not. I'm hearing one thing and I'm reading something different. And the problem with that is, you are going to ask, if they're not here, say it's an acting fire marshal, to utilize their discretion in a high fire danger zone area. And there's all these codes in place that say you should, and this, do that. But in the small print that they have discretion. I'm confident these 2 would use good discretion, like we've heard. I'm not confident others would. I'll give you an example. If you play out the codes as they're written now, I have a neighbor who is wanting to build a barn. His application, I think he tried to submit it this week. He's still designing it. It's on 10 acres. It's on the backside of his 10 acres. We share a driveway with 5 other homes, and they all branch off onto these homes. I'm guesstimating that driveway from where we share homes to his property line is probably 1/4 of a mile. and then probably another to the back of his property, whatever, 10 acres, it's elongated. So probably another at least quarter of a mile, half a mile. So the way I read this is this would trigger, and it does say structures, fire road access. To answer your question, it is structures, and a barn would be a structure. He would have to widen the part at the bottom to 24 feet, pave it, or use a hard surface, all-weather surface, and then once he got to his property line to his barn would be another 14 feet of a hard road surface. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be safe. Yeah, I drove fire engines myself, and we need to provide access, but there has been a way to do this. I think Liberty Fire was a true test in our area, and I had 25 fire engines use that same road to get to the top, and every home had a fire engine at the house on that hill without a problem. So it is working. That was the true test, and they got a tough job, and I want to commend them. I think you're in great hands with the fire chief and the new fire marshal. Adria doesn't realize it, but we worked together on my project out in wine country, and I was issued lemons, and she helped me make not only lemonade, but we put out a lemonade stand, and everyone benefited from it, and much appreciated. I think you're in good hands, but I think if you could put something in the code more than just the discretion, so that the acting fire marshal or new fire marshal, whoever may be, has some coverage, because that's a lot of liability when you're asking them to use discretion in a high fire danger area in rural homes. They may not have the competence or the confidence to do that, and you're asking them to do a lot. So I think putting some other clarity, some more words in there where they have something to point to, giving them that avenue would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Before Mr. Amdahl, let's squeeze Mr. Klein in, because it doesn't look like he's asking for 6 minutes. Are you passing?
That's correct. And Mr. Klein was next, sir.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I'll start by saying I'm very appreciative of staff, specifically Doug Stroh-Snyder, Andy, Jarrett. I know they've been working on this code a lot. Jonathan, to your comment about giving the public opportunity to come speak, not too many people here tonight. This code was run by the Development Advisory Group and vetted by the group, which has done a tremendous amount of work that this council has adopted our other suggestions. I think you guys need to consider the unintended consequences of delaying this, particularly as it deals with the mid-rise revision and the commercial drive aisle width. I'd like to hear from staff. How many projects do you currently in plan check do you think that a delay in this is going to affect? What would be the anticipated adoption date if we delay for a workshop? I have a little bit of experience, as some of you know. I was a volunteer firefighter for 6 years, and I can tell you at the Hillcrest Congregational Church about 30 years ago, a paid professional from LA County Station 49 buried the truck on a church fire. Not because of the access, because where he spotted the rig. So you guys are getting tunnel vision, focusing on something that, well, I'll leave it at that. You're focusing on something and not listening to what the chief has presented to you. We're not only talking about access, we're talking about where you spot the rig, and that's not known until you get on the fire ground. I'm really disappointed. Probably more so than I ever been. Each and every one of you have campaigned and professed support our public safety. And tonight, from where I'm sitting, you're arguing with our public safety. They're coming to you, asking you, presenting to you. When I was on Planning Commission, I always emailed staff my questions up front, not blindsiding them and the public at a meeting requesting a delay. So I would beg of you to reconsider what you're doing here tonight and adopt these codes that your staff is asking you for. Be consistent. Support your public safety.
Mr. Amdahl, please.
Good evening. I believe my project kind of falls into one of those little caveats that doesn't get addressed in the matrix of the rules. At the Planning Commission hearing, I petitioned to have this to be an all-weather road. That was the code in 2019. It was changed in 19, and they took out the words all-weather road. Under that definition, I was allowed to use that. Now understand the project has a 4-foot retaining wall surrounding it. It's a 4 to 6 foot compacted fill with a 6-inch DG top. Now, I've been building roads in Temecula and Murrieta for 40 years. I know the code. I know Bob Mailing knows I know the code. We go through it all the time. That street section, 2-foot over-X recompacted, 24 inches, is probably the biggest street section I've seen built. A road is as good as what you build it on. It's not what's on the surface, it's what's below it. I have a 6-foot compacted section, and I've got DG on the top. And I'm being asked to put in a $200,000 concrete roadway. And Planning Commission had all the sympathy in the world. LaPaglia knows this business. He's been in this business forever. Mike was supporting me, but his hands were tied because the code said this. I'm asking that they change that code back to what it was and say all weather. You can look at each individual project and determine whether all weather based on the cross slope. If there's a no grading issue, if you have a good cross section going across it with a 0.5% or less fall, you're never going to have any, or greater, you're not going to have any ponding. If it's steeper than that, you shouldn't have it. You shouldn't have a steep section because then it will erode. But this isn't the case. I've got a completely flat piece of property here, completely engineered and built. I have an engineered letter here from our soils engineer stating that this can go 75,000-pound all-weather road. This can drive anywhere on my site. A fire truck can go anywhere. It doesn't have to stay on that fire lane. It can go down any part of that property, and it'll be fine. We're going to leave the front of the project concrete because it's nice looking. It serves the propane facility next door. It's access from my fire truck. It accesses my roads well. But everything from there back on the exhibit that I'm showing you, I would like to have it changed to DG, a base material compacted. And I will delineate that road. I'll show you exactly where those lines are. I'll demarcate it like I'm required to do. The fire lanes, the 4-foot paths that are showing on my fire plan remains. I'd like to see all that be the same. And what I'm asking the fire department to do is to amend their code, add those words that were taken out in 2019, all weather surfaces. They're just as good. As a road builder, I know they're just as good. They're not going to fail. If it's sitting there and a truck's sitting there and the water's dripping out of it, it doesn't fail. The truck's not going to get stuck. Compacted material is compacted material. And if it's got a base on it, it's got enough drainage where it's not going to hurt anything. If it's cross slope, it's not going to pond under the truck. I understand that the fire department has found itself in situations where there was a bad engineered area, a rural road that failed for them. I understand that. But that's not going to happen on my site. And to require me to put this $200,000 additional is really hurtful to the project. We have no occupied sites. There's nobody living on this site. This isn't a matter of public safety. This is private property. Nobody's living on this site. I'm putting 3 fire hydrants in there just to protect the property. We shouldn't have an issue with safety on this. Certainly isn't a matter of public safety. This is a private road. It has to have keyed access to get into it. I'd appreciate if that happens, if there's a workshop. I certainly have to move this project forward, and I'd like to have the discretion to have them talk about exempting me from having to put this in. I'm real close to having to install it right now on where I'm at in my construction, and it would be nice to get this resolved. rather than wait for months for more decisions and more discussion. If this one particular issue could be resolved, I'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
City Clerk, any other speakers at this time?
Seeing none.
Okay, we're going to go ahead at this time, close the public hearing, bring it back to the dais. Question, Madam City Attorney, with respect to this item, this is the first portion of this item, right? It will come back to council no matter what. The question I have, Chief, is can you look at the things that you think that need to be modified that would help implement what you were talking about and bring them back by the next meeting? Because we're going to have the next meeting anyhow.
Mr. Mayor, if I could interrupt for a second with a question. As has been discussed, the new state codes go into effect January 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally, if we could do first reading tonight and then second reading at the next meeting, meanwhile, give staff time to come back with tweaks just to those sections that you have questions on, and then that ordinance could come separately.
As long as we have clarification on what tweaks mean and those sections, yes, I have no issue with that at all. Because it's going to come back no matter what, right? So my point is, if we can clarify, get that taken care of, and then bring it back, we kill two birds, one stone, correct?
Right, but if you do make changes on the second reading, that you'd have to reintroduce it and then have a second reading again. Versus just approving what we have now and then having staff come back with changes to the sections that you have questions on.
I guess I'll leave that up to the council, you guys. My thing is, I want to make sure that it's clear, that it's transparent, and people are being told what they can do, and that whatever we approve is what we all have agreed on up here. So, comments? Certainly.
In terms of the discretionary language to hone in the powers of the approving fire marshal, would those approvals or denials or delays run through a chain of command that you two would see?
Of course, they would run through the chain of command that we would see. I think the question was, what if we're not here? What if it's not, what if we're 10 years from now?
Of course, but I was looking at giving some time for their development of what the mayor is requesting that is reasonable and that is feasible and would help in a number of situations, because we've all heard stories about someone who takes a dislike to an applicant and personalities get in the way. But if there's a chain of command and you two, for the foreseeable future, are aware of the denials or the obstacles or the problems and are approving it and giving it your blessing, I think that would buy us a window of some months. It's my thought. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I concur with Alan Long's statement. There has to be clarity. And so if we're going to move forward with this tonight, if we approve this tonight and it comes back again, you can come back with clarity within the language. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay. This conversation this evening has shed some light. I think we understood what intent means. We didn't put that on paper specifically. So we understand that there is an ask to provide with specific standards. We were trying to use discretion as a standard, which I understand why people, have concerns with that. So we could certainly, we're talking about one section of the fire code here and possibly two because of the definitions.
But those are, and see, that's my whole point, where I think that we're kind of off track and in the weeds with respect to this. The item that we're talking about is something that was optional, that we went over and above state standard when we talk about the DG and all weather. So the question now becomes, Are we just approving what the state is mandating versus going, let's pull back what we did and figure out how we can make that so that it's equitable and fair to everyone that gets into the process and still get done what we need to get done for the state. I don't understand the issue here.
Well, I think what we have the existing municipal fire code in the city, which has these standards. We're rolling that back a little bit. It's still in excess of the state's model code, which says all-weather surface, which is not defined. They leave that up to the municipalities to define what they want to be an all-weather surface. So what we're looking at is for the industrial areas of the city, the urban areas of the city, pavement, some sort of hard surface, because that, we have higher fuel loads in those areas. Yeah. The rural areas of the community is where we would look at, which one was it? 503 2.3, amending that to give specifics for rural areas that allow the all-weather surface. And then we would have to define all-weather surface, as I understood as well.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. Yes, some clear language when it comes to rural areas with respect to building a barn and having to build roads to get to the barn. I know I experienced that remodeling a house, wanting to, put in curb and gutter in a rural area. Ridiculous with streetlights. I mean, come on. So I don't want that to happen to somebody else. So we need to have clear, specific language. And if you can add that to this, and we'll have it, we'll review it before, and then you can bring it back for the second reading. And then if we have to make amend to that, according to our city attorney, we can bring it back again. At least that keeps it coming down the pipeline, and we can get something done before January 1st when this goes forward.
And to add to that, Madam?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, Pro Tem, sorry. Next city council meeting is when, Madam City Clerk?
November 15th.
15th, correct? Okay, so that gives us between now and the 15th, and if we had to have a special meeting, I have no problem with coming back to convene a special meeting to resolve this issue so that we meet the state requirement by January. Yes, Councilmember White.
I like what you just said, Mr. Mayor. And in listening to Mayor Pro Tem, it likens to my thinking with the ADUs, there's some pre-approved standards, and it helps people who are trying to quickly move through the process understand these are preset parameters that work. You'll have no problem. You're on the fast track. So I think that is a little bit of the business model that you're looking for. Yep. Less discretion, clarify the intent, give a couple of packages so that people understand. We can't rule by exception. You can't write these codes by the exceptions, but to give some standards similar to the ADUs that are being introduced would be desirable, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And also the language, what you can do and what the consequences will be if you do not meet those standards. I think that's extremely important that we're clear and concise in what we're expecting.
And I think she's referring to the enforcement implementation of that portion.
Yes, that is correct.
Somebody get this privilege and they don't live up to that standard, that there's a consequence to it. Is that fair?
Yes,
okay.
Right.
Wouldn't the consequence be denial of the project?
No. What we're saying, look, if somebody gets a project that's approved and a year and a half down the road, we do an inspection when we're doing annual inspections or every 2 years, whatever it's going to be, that we look at it and go, yeah, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Here's the consequence.
But they wouldn't get their certificate of completion or occupancy?
No, they're finished and already occupying the property. The concern is, will they maintain it in the future, right?
Oh, future maintenance.
Right. Okay. So, and if they don't, this is where the problem comes. That road that the chief was referring to was more than accessible at one point. It wasn't maintained or it wouldn't have failed. So that's where we go. How do we have an enforcement policy to make sure that maintenance is being done? That makes sense? Yes, okay. All right. So did you understand all of that, Chief, or should I repeat it again?
Yes, Mayor. We will work on these specific sections and come back.
Offered to repeat it again. At least there was good humor on that.
The intent is understood. We will bring it back.
Thank you, sir. And then, Madam City Manager. Hi. Did you hear all of that? Okay. All right. So I think we're all in agreement here. Get the modifications you need to get done, get it back. If we have to have a special meeting, we'll have a special meeting, whatever it takes to get this done so that it's, and what is the date in January? January 1st? Okay. Means we got to get it done before January 1st.
Let's get this motion forward. Why is he shaking his head?
Why are you shaking your head?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think what Mr. Krog is referring to is, so there's a 30-day waiting period before an ordinance becomes effective.
For the public portion of it, or?
For any ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
And that we, sorry, my mic's going in and out, that we can currently do an urgency ordinance so that it can be effective immediately.
That works for me. I don't have a problem with that. My colleagues are fine with that. Okay. Do I get consensus on that? That's fine. Does that work for you, Chief?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. So I guess we're looking for a motion on the staff recommendation regarding the requests that we have.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could please request that the maker of the motion please state the motion.
I'm not doing the motion.
Okay.
I tried to keep up.
You got it, or you want me to do it?
Some of them back on the language, and then we can.
I think we got this. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll tag team it.
All right.
I
So.
would just say the motion. The chief knows what he needs to do.
And then with any modifications.
Right, pretty much. I think basically what we're looking at is to approve staff recommendation regarding this, including sections 503-1 amended where required fire apparatus access roads and private residential driveways, access roads, and use caution with this because the chief, the one thing that you said that I want to bring up just to make sure, you say industrial versus commercial application. Is that a light commercial application? Is that an industrial application? Because that's a little concerning.
Access in the fire code has, I believe it's commercial and industrial are looked at as the same with the road widths. I believe in the fire code.
I thought light commercial and residential are defined the same, and then it's commercial industrial where you have, because I went through this with batch plants.
So road widths are defined differently.
Road widths
based
are.
On the
But
height of the
all-weather
buildings.
surfaces aren't. That's my point.
The current fire
I think
code,
the fire marshals can.
Yeah. Let me let Adria speak to that one.
I'm trying to track.
See, they define it clearly when it comes to access, undoubted, but they don't when it comes to all-weather surfaces. Because I went through this with batch plants and other things that we've done over the years, and I pumped a lot of aggregate. So,
to be clear, though, the fire code that we have existing requires the pavement or the hard surfaces that we talked about, the hard permanent surfaces for everywhere in Murrieta. What we're talking about changing in this is the rural areas. So changing the rural areas only to meet that DG surface.
So what happens if you have a commercial application, i.e. horse boarding? We have a situation right now where we just cut a ribbon on a company that has commercial access, that has dirt roads.
Well, the reason
that's in a rural area.
Part of the reason, and not to prolong the discussion, but part of the reason we used the language that we did is so that it was clear that it was for structures, homes. It wasn't for commercial applications in a rural area. It was for residential applications.
And there will be no exceptions on that?
Not the way the fire code is written.
What do you think?
You want me to read?
Certainly.
So my motion to the city clerk is conduct the first reading of ordinance 583-22 entitled an ordinance of City Council, Murrieta, California, adding the amended portions of Title 15 Municipal Code, adopting the 2022 California Building Standards Code, and adopting a mandatory swimming pool drowning prevention safety feature. We didn't actually talk about that anymore.
No, we were gonna offer all the options and then it was gonna be predicated on two.
Okay.
Is what we had said.
Requiring all the options. Conduct the first reading ordinance of 584-22 entitled an ordinance of the City Council of Murrieta, California, adopting the California Fire Code 2022 edition based on the 2021 International Fire Code, including local amendments and additions of clear language for rural residential, defined intent, to define clearly on disciplinary procedures, and clarity on any discretionary item. Is there any of my colleagues would like to say any general clarity on discretionary items? On various discretionary items. They can't do every exception. On the ones pertaining to rural residential.
And I think that if you have.
Is that clear, Crystal?
That's what I was just getting ready to say. We have to, yeah.
Add the urgency.
No, the enforcement issue.
We'll define clarity on disciplinary procedures. That's what I asked. Is that enforcement?
Yeah.
Okay. Hashtag enforcement.
So I also think that there should be some latitude afforded that if an area has been zoned where they can, and this is my concern, I don't want a ranch or a property that's in a rural area, that could have a commercial use that you don't afford at least to look and give them the opportunity to do this. You know, not meaning that it's an industrial park, but look at the application and then afford that, because I think that's important.
Okay, we'll work on some language with that.
But do you get where I'm going?
I totally understand.
Okay,
good.
And I would just like to thank you for your time. Welcome. What a welcoming day we have had for you. So, and you have to second your motion. Yeah. Oh.
So don't you wish we had the workshop now at 8:30? We're looking for a motion in a second. We got the motion.
It's done. Closing comments. No, I just like to thank you.
I also want to thank you as well.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
5-0.
I know we had a lot of questions.
Welcome to Murrieta. Thank you, Chief. You're a class act as usual. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you. Have a nice evening, and I'm going to ask for a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's perfect.
We're going to move on now to discussion item number 9.
All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Jarrett Romano with the Planning Division. I'm presenting here tonight an on-call contract amendment and a budget adjustment. Development Services staff relies upon other existing contracts to provide planning services for support of our customers, the public, and our applicants. For succeeding fiscal years, the amounts for these on-call contracts will be budgeted as part of our biannual budget process. These contracts were previously approved by City Council and appropriated, but were inadvertently not included in the current fiscal year's budget. Here's a list of our existing on-call contracts. As you can see on the top, we have PlaceWorks, Rick Engineering Company, and Michael Baker International. They provide senior planner services for our larger projects. We have about 8 projects assigned to them. We also have Ron Goldman. You may recall him from Muir Hill Specific Plan, also Calmia Equestrian Estates recently. And then we have other miscellaneous contracts for support. For brevity, I think if we look at this list, $800,000 of the amount is paid for in advance by our customers, and we deduct through invoices. The other 128 is for services such as short-term vacation rental and other smaller contracts that we have. But just big picture, most of what we're talking about tonight is already reimbursed prior to the expenditure by our customers. And with that, we'd like to recommend that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute the 9th Amendment of the agreement for Ron Goldman for as needed, as well as amend the fiscal year 2022-23 operating budget for the Development Service Department and for consultant contract services by $928,000 and increase the revenue appropriation by $800,000. I'm here for any questions, and thank you for your time.
I think you're awesome. We've been waiting for this for quite a while. I know it's something that most everybody on this dais agrees with. It's going to help the city exponentially. So, councilmember questions. Councilmember White.
No questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone.
No questions.
Councilmember Warren.
No questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Ditto.
All right, I'm looking for Madam City Clerk. Any public comments on this item?
Seeing none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna call for a motion in a second then, please. I didn't get it.
I got it.
There we go. I'm still not getting it. Yeah.
Glitchy. There you go. There
Thank
you go.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously, 5-0.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Item
Thank you,
number
Councilman.
10, Town Square Amphitheater Ad Hoc Subcommittee Update. Mr. Ambrose. You again.
Actually, Mrs. Crane.
Mrs. Crane.
Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Kristen Crane, Assistant City Manager. This is actually my first council presentation with you here since I've joined the city, today being my 3-month anniversary. Item 10 on your agenda is an update from the Town Square Park Amphitheater City Council Ad Hoc Subcommittee, which consists of council members Christy White and Cindy Warren. And I'm here this evening with Community Services Director Brian Ambrose, who's been participating in this process, along with Assistant to the City Manager Louis Lacasella, who is unfortunately unable to be here. He's attending a conference. So I will be introducing this item and providing an overview of the agenda report and the ad hoc subcommittee's recommendation, and then turning it over to the subcommittee members to provide additional perspective and comments. Starting with a brief background overview, construction of the Town Square Amphitheater was completed in spring 2021 as a venue for large events, and there have been several discussions over the past 2 years with the City Council on your vision for the usage of the amphitheater and the direction for it. And during those discussions, the Council expressed interest in conducting a procurement process to seek a third-party vendor that the city would contract with to manage the operations for 4 to 6 large-scale events at the amphitheater and all of the marketing and oversight. There would be city oversight of that. Last March, the City Council established the City Council Town Square Park Amphitheater Ad Hoc Subcommittee, it's a mouthful, to assess submittals that would be received through the procurement process and then to bring back a recommendation to the City Council. As part of that process, last June, the city released what's called a request for information, or an RFI, for special event management services for the amphitheater, seeking information from qualified professional firms on how those firms would propose to manage and promote, again, about 4 to 6 events, concerts, and festivals per year at the amphitheater. The city received proposals from 3 firms, each with experience in event management, although they each had varying degrees of experience with all of the relevant facets for this particular dynamic of a municipally owned amphitheater in a public park. The 3 firms were interviewed about a month ago in late September, and overall the RFI process and interviews were deemed to be really worthwhile and very informative. So through that process, as is conveyed in the agenda report with the subcommittee's recommendation, the subcommittee determined that before moving forward to contract with the firm for special event management services, the city would be well served to first establish for itself really clear expectations and policy directions for many aspects of how that arrangement would work. Those key details would then enable a vendor to factor those expectations into their business plan and a corresponding financial model, which would ultimately translate to what the cost would be for that contracted arrangement for the city. So this would be beneficial to both the vendor and the city because the vendor would have more clarity on the city's expectations for the services that they would be providing. So this is much like when the city contracts for other services and establishes a very clear scope of work before we go out with an RFP or request for qualifications to know what it is that we're looking for. This next slide lists a few examples of the types of policy direction that the city needs to establish. And again, this is based on the findings of the subcommittee. There's a more complete list on page 3 of your agenda report, and these are just a few examples. So the purpose, goals, and budget for concerts and events that would be planned by the contracted vendor, the roles and responsibilities of the vendor versus city staff and a city contractor, and at whose cost, including both assistance before the event and during events, whether to allow for outside sponsorships, financial responsibility for things like security, law enforcement, additional emergency medical services, use by a vendor of city-owned equipment and spaces, and then expectations about hours for the events, start and end time to minimize the impact on surrounding neighborhood, parameters related to the noise and sound from concerts and music, and things like providing off-site parking and shuttle service. So as the agenda report says, many of these points are policy considerations that would need the city council to review them and then set direction on expectations for what those would be. The subcommittee is not at this time tonight posing those questions to the full council, rather reporting back on the status of the RFI process and then making a recommendation for what the next steps would be. So based on these learnings from the RFI process and the interviews, the subcommittee is recommending that the city council temporarily hold off on moving forward with securing a third-party vendor for special event management services in order to first focus on finalizing a use and operations plan for community group sponsored events at the amphitheater, and then to direct staff to bring that back to the council at a future meeting. And then once the council has adopted that use plan and operations policy for community groups, the city council could then opt to reconvene with this process of hiring a third-party vendor using what they've established for community groups as a foundation starting point for what those expectations would be for a third-party vendor. And again, then we would bring that back ultimately to the city council for your approval. So that's an overview of the agenda report and the subcommittee's recommendation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our two council members, Councilmember Warren and Councilmember White.
Well, just a few questions for you beforehand.
Okay.
And maybe some clarification from Councilmember White. With respect to this, I thought we were pretty clear on direction that we wanted to go with this committee and what its job was. So I'm a little lost at that we've had all this time invested in this and that we're not any further ahead with it. So what is it? What is the holdup on this to move this forward?
Mayor, if I could jump in and answer that. And I think that that's probably a question that's, better posed to our subcommittee. If there is a dramatic change in the direction that they're thinking of going, which this kind of is, it would be appropriate to bring it back to the city council and make sure that the council is good with that change of direction. That's all this is this evening, is we just want to be extra transparent and make sure that nothing extreme happens that the council wasn't expecting.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Madam City Manager, but the whole purpose of procuring a vendor was to actually create these policies through that vendor and bring it forward. And then they could bring back their suggestions regarding the policy and operations of this and how we would direct staff to best work with them in the future. So I don't understand why the council's weighing in on that again when they've already weighed in on it.
That might be best answered by the subcommittee members.
I thought that's what I just did, but. Councilmember Warren?
I'd like Councilmember White to go ahead and answer that first. That was a good one.
Well, I'll take it. I think that the subcommittee working with staff decided to do, instead of an RFP, an RFI in order to gather some preliminary information. And overall, we came away with more undefined areas where parameters were needed to be set by council that we did not come into our subcommittee meetings with having parameters established. A number of issues were flushed out, and even our respondents said that they, based on our RFI, needed to have more specificity to even be able to price out a proposal that would make financial sense for them to come back to the city with. So we did a lot of due diligence and a lot of investigative probative conversations with our applicants or respondents. And we were left with more questions than we started with. And I will go on to say that based on the time that Councilmember Warren and staff and I have spent and the current community demand, taking a pause seems to make sense because a third-party vendor and business with the usage plan will benefit from having the community usage plan and policy established. And we already have community members that have waited more than a year to use the great asset that we have. And I think once we get that rolling, would be an appropriate time to use that document as a foundation for reconvening and moving forward with the possibility of the budget, the goals, and the purpose of having a usage policy for a third-party vendor. I hope that gives some more clarification.
Thank you, Councilmember White.
Do you want me?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've been using the Town Square Park for a variety of events, planned and organized by private companies, government agencies, nonprofits for many years with great success. The only thing that has changed is we built a new, bigger stage with much needed amenities for all to enjoy. But with that came many questions on how to utilize this beautiful venue to benefit our community. I believe the vision for Murrieta to continue to host city-sponsored events along with providing a venue for local community and nonprofit organizations to hold events to have large-scale signature events through a third-party vendor. All of these events have a goal to help bring visitors into our community, benefiting our downtown businesses and Murrieta as a whole. However, this also brought a long list of questions regarding issues on how to protect and keep our venue and community safe. The more the committee dove into the questions, the more questions came to the surface, such as noise, parking, and you've heard them tonight, staffing, security, grass replacement. Truly, the list did go on. During the RFI process, interview process, in my mind, one company does stand out more than the other two because of their proven experience in running large-scale events throughout Southern California. I believe this vendor would be a huge asset to helping us with all the questions and concerns that we have so that we can bring a policy forward for council's consideration after the first of the year. That being said, I feel there are still some issues that need to be addressed regarding our current policy for the venue to be used by community and nonprofit organizations as we also move forward to select and finalize a third-party vendor for special large-scale events. I would like my esteemed colleagues to consider allowing the ad hoc subcommittee the opportunity to meet with city staff as much as possible between now and the first of the year, that we can bring back an updated policy and a recommended third-party vendor for consideration at either the second meeting in January or the first meeting in February. I can tell you one thing, I am more confident than ever that we need the experts' help and advice with advance in policy so that we don't limit the vision that we have here. That's how I sum it up. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Warren, out of the three, you said that there was one that stood out.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And with regards to staff, the applicant that she's referring to, are you in agreement with the one that stands out? I don't know who the applicants are, and it doesn't matter, but the one that she's referring to, Brian, were you on the same page with Councilwoman Warren?
Assuming that it's the same one, I'm going to be embarrassed if it was a different one. But I believe we had discussions about one being better than the other two. Yes.
Can you go back to the slide where it talked about the noise? Okay, so the roles and responsibilities of the vendors versus the city staff and contractors. The business that, let's just say it's the one that you like is A. We're going to refer to A. When you were interviewing the applicant A, did they give suggestions of the roles and responsibilities and the vendors versus the city staff and contractors? Did they give suggestions how that, if they're going to be doing 4 to 6 events, when they're talking about vendors, whether it's food, whether it's crafts, whether it's fencing, whether it's chairs, the logistics, where people are going to park, did that vendor A talk about solutions?
As part of the questions that we asked, I think all three of them addressed them.
So they were all addressed, and were you comfortable with the solutions that they brought forward? Now, I understand.
I don't know that there were solutions brought forward, but they were definitely
ideas.
Correct.
Okay, and were you in agreement? Would you say at least 90% of what they brought forward? I mean, we all know that per event there's got to be tweaking. I mean, we just had an event at our own amphitheater. We didn't expect 10,000 people. That was, a shock to all of us. And we realized that next year we definitely have to come together and figure out logistically how we're going to deal with that. Did applicant A bring solutions, ideas on how to mitigate some of these issues?
Yeah, I would sum it up as they definitely had the capacity.
Okay, great. And then now the allowance of outside sponsorships. Why would we put a policy on outside sponsorships when that should be, applicant A, if he's bringing in or she's bringing in, let's just say Blake Shelton, which I would love to see, obviously they're going to have the capacity of sponsorship opportunities, correct? It's not the city's responsibility about sponsorships.
Councilwoman
Yes.
Stone, if I can answer that. I don't think that that's what they're referring to. What we're referring to is, as a policy, does the council want to allow sponsorships of all types? So say a cannabis, industry wants to do that. Say Anheuser-Busch. Those may be completely acceptable to the city council. We just don't know. So when we refer to sponsorship, it's more that. It's not the who.
Well, we obviously don't allow cannabis in our city, so I can't
And we haven't
imagine.
allowed alcohol really without a great deal of difficulty, so I don't understand why we would change that policy now.
And the thing is, what happens if there is a major, beer fest that the applicant wants to bring in that's been very successful? Don't you think that we should be taking this event by event to see, and bring forward these ideas and coming forward? I mean, are we going to be very black and white going out the door that no, we're not going to have, a beer fest or an Oktoberfest, which includes alcohol? I mean, I think we already agreed that we're going to be doing alcohol. I can understand the cannabis. And then the financial responsibility for certain elements. What do you mean? What does that mean?
So, Councilmember Stone, if I may, the point of the list is to identify what some of those topics are, where we would bring back to the council a recommendation of how to address those. So, for example, there are elements within the overall amphitheater that we would need to talk about if we're bringing in a special event firm to manage events there, and there's going to be an overall, I'm going to call it like a business plan financial model of what that would look like and what their costs are to provide service. So do they pay for their electricity associated with events? That's just one kind of minor detail, but kind of thinking about that. Does the city bear the cost of those expenses, or is that part of what the vendor would incorporate into their cost of the overall package? So it's like, that's an example. And similarly, on the sponsorship topic, it's more like posing that question. Are we comfortable with a vendor being able to have sponsorships? Okay, great. And then they have that they can build into when they put together a business plan, what that would look like, versus if there are clear things that the council is not comfortable with, that they would also know that and could incorporate that into their business plan, if that makes sense. So it's just getting that kind of clear direction on, and we would bring back to the council, like, what are those things, and just a proposal to respond to that then sets the foundation for what that would look like going forward. But it's, a policy decision for all of you.
And yes,
I guess what's frustrating for me is, why wasn't all of this already established? Here now we're going to go to the end of the year, possibly January, and we're missing out again. And just like Councilwoman Warren said, we've already been doing events already. This is frustrating.
Certainly. And Councilmember Stone, I think that the examples of the existing events that have been happening, those also provide a really good model to then take from that what is really working, and then how would that factor into what our expectations would be of a vendor that would be coming in, or community groups as well, right, of what that would need to look like. I'm new to the organization. I know this has been going on, but I think that this is a unique facility in a community, and this kind of an arrangement where the city is going to be contracting with a vendor to take on this services. It's going to be a really special relationship. It's not like every city in California is doing that and has this kind of facility. And so it is a learning process and trying to do it right. And now we've had the facility and it's worked one way, and now we're kind of moving to the next level with entering a partnership with a special event firm. And so I think it's a matter of, if the council wants to move forward more quickly, just taking a little extra time to kind of hammer out some of those expectations so that we could provide that to a firm as they're developing a cost proposal for us.
And yes, I will answer your question. You are correct that each event has its own little nuances, and they have to be, and each event has to address those nuances.
The city of Murrieta has a noise ordinance, correct? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you're addressing, we've already talked about alcohol. We already know, basically the hours. Yes, traffic and parking, control shuttle. I believe that would be the special events coordinator, that logistically, that's part of their job description.
So yes, those types of things were not spelled out in the RFI as far as what the city's expectations are, simply because it was just requesting information. And so it's some of the firms even said it would be helpful for us to have more feedback from the city about what it is that you're looking for to help us develop what that financial proposal would look like. So it's putting that more in writing, that they are expected to follow the noise ordinance.
So the direction that we gave you for the RFI, it was not complete.
That was an RFP for correction.
RFP. So basically, the direction we gave you was not complete.
If I could jump in here, it's not staff's responsibility to establish policy.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. So the direction we gave them, it was not basically complete.
So I think what we're trying to say is at this moment, staff doesn't feel that we have enough information to give you a really good recommendation. Okay. Now, if you want us to go down a path and create a program kind of out of thin air and bring it back to you, we can do that. But I don't know that you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, but I mean, just so you know that I've done events, big events, 10,000 people, and when we bring on a vendor or company, while we have the basics of our wish list, they're the ones that come in and they're the ones that tell us, based on this particular event, these are the logistical issues that we have. And so we built on that. And I guess in my mind, I guess that's what I was thinking, that we gave direction, and hopefully that the business that we select is going to come forward and offer, all these logistical solutions to each event. And I'm presuming that each event is going to be much different. And so there are going to be different logistical requirements in order for us to be successful. So just so you kind of understand where my head's at a little bit.
I'd like to piggyback on what
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
saying. I agree. So if we were to say choose one of these three vendors, have no idea who they are. So to choose one of our vendors, right? And isn't it the vendor's job to make your job as city staff easy? We want to take we want to take it off your back, right? You don't need this. That's why we're going to give it to the vendor. And won't they bring it back for us to approve it? Isn't that part of an RFP? It'll come back. So here's our 4 signature events for 2023. This is event number 1, completely different than 2. These are the caveats, and we're going to carve those out. And whoever the vendor may be, isn't that who's going to do all the work and bring it back to us with it all done?
So yes, what I would describe as, through what's being discussed here, is fleshing out a little bit more what the city's expectations are for what the city would be doing versus a vendor would be doing, and really clarifying that. Is that the city basically handing over the keys and saying, have a great weekend, we'll see you on Monday? Or is there an expectation of that the city would be participating, staff would be participating more in the activities of planning leading up to the event, or having some kind of presence during an event?
Weren't we going to have a staff liaison?
Yeah, we originally.
Those are like the kinds of questions you're asking. That's part of what we want to confirm with you. And that way we would be able to provide that. And I'm envisioning it. It's not a 25-page document. Hopefully it gets down to kind of like big guiding principles of what the expectations are of this vendor, that then we say, okay, we're going to work with you, and this is what we're looking for you to do, and this is what we're envisioning we're going to do.
So did the vendors give us expectations of what they expected us to do, our performa? Because how can we perform when we don't really even know? I wouldn't know the first step to bring Luke Bryant to, Murrieta.
Right. So the RFI, request for information, where you're putting out to a vendor to kind of say, we're looking at doing this. This is the kind of thing we have in mind. Please respond back if you have the, some experience doing this type of thing. Describe for us what your experience is, how you would go about it, and people on your team, what their experience is, and how you're envisioning the cost model would work. It's pretty abbreviated, really. And it's going through it and then looking at, well, how would this work? Okay, it would be helpful to provide more detail if we're going to go forward, and then actually try to negotiate a contract with a vendor and a true scope of work, specifying that out. Not to the degree of every single little event, every little detail, but kind of the big picture stuff of what it is that we're expecting. So it's in the scope of work.
So should we do our policy versus like a music event, a beer, wine event? I mean, do we have to put it in different pieces?
I see Cindy, or excuse me, Councilmember Warren shaking her head.
Okay.
No, and what brought this together is that the vendor that I was leaning towards, and I'm still leaning towards, gave us A, B, and C. And they had questions, such as, would the city be giving in-kind services? Would there be revenue sharing, and what would that look like? Would they be giving some staffing? Would we be using some of the police for traffic control and security? They had questions for us.
But that would be per.
But no, but those are but no, not really, because if you look at it, you could have traffic issues at any level. And they were asking us specifically, would we be willing to put money in a budget to cover some of these signature events?
That's a simple response. No. The whole premise of going out to this and you know, people can concur. I've been asking for this since 2016.
I understand.
When with this thing, and we've been working on it for many years. And I think the whole premise behind outsourcing this was to go get it out of our staff's hair, let our staff do what they do best, which are our local events and other things. This should be, okay, we're going to do this on a per diem basis. We're going to do it on, you pay X amount of dollars for access. We know what it costs to operate our park, and if there's a spike in our energy, there's a way to sub-meter it if that's what we want to do. We also know that there's an hourly cost that's affixed to PD when they're tapped to go, okay, you're going to do this event. And that's simple to provide to the orchestrator of the event. But where I think this is getting convoluted too, is there's a difference between a management company that comes in to manage an event and the person that's the talent that provides the talent. They're going to ask, and I worked at the Hollywood Bowl, you know, the Pantages Theater, Cinerama Dome. I've worked in some big venues, and you always wind up having the person that orchestrates the talent gives their demands and what they're going to require to management. Then the manager of that facility that we would be subcontracting to is going to provide that, and they know there's a cost associated with it. With respect to the local stuff, I mean, I think it was the intention, you might correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ambrose, but we gave direction that we would offer that access to X amount of affiliations and that it would be done on a cost basis, that we weren't looking to make a profit. Or has that changed? Because that was a great.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The question, if a local charity or somebody comes in and wants to do an event, we're not looking to make money off them. We're providing access to them. And
It's like a break even.
Right. You know,
right. The RFI was specific to the 4 to 6 large-scale events.
So that's it.
And then the city would still manage those community-based and internal special events.
When we talked about this, we talked about public safety. And public safety would have to weigh in on each event and whatever amount of public safety needed to be at that event, they were going to give the cost to the promoter, and they're going to have to build that into their budget, not our budget. It's their budget.
And yet they all asked us the same question. In-kind services. Does the city have a budget to coincide with all of this?
No.
Okay, but you answered that now. I couldn't answer that then.
But we addressed that at the previous meeting.
What's that, Councilman White?
We need a budget in order to be able to give them parameters as to what to do.
When you refer to a budget, you mean donating services as if they were a signature event?
I mean, just to take a step back, Brian, would you speak to the fact that they both, the second and third respondents indicated that the city would need to be prepared to cover a loss?
They're not covering losses.
Oh, no. We're not covering
I'm just not.
loss.
I'll just finish my point.
ahead.
Thank you. That the city would need to be prepared in year one to take a loss, and that this is a 2 to 3 year buildup towards success. Could you elaborate on the information that we received?
Sure. And Madam City Attorney, is it okay if I use the names rather than good? Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on,
and I don't
who
think
the
we're
vendors
referring
are.
to
'Cause you're-
the same vendors. One that was
let's
called
say
A before.
the third vendor was the most local, smallest vendor. It definitely did not have the capacity. I think we all came to an agreement.
That was the first one. That was the first
Oh,
one.
the number in order. Okay.
Yes.
I get it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm a little slow.
But I mean, we shouldn't even probably go there. There was a small local vendor.
Correct. And that vendor, I believe the subcommittee had said the capacity, this was probably beyond them because they asked literally for staff, our staffing to help them. The second vendor interviewed asked for basically what was a retention arrangement where we would pay a per monthly fee.
A retainer? A retainer?
A retainer.
Oh, God.
I'm sorry, a retainer.
Sorry.
And I think it was a little confusing to the subcommittee because we didn't know whether we were actually getting the event or we were getting consultation to get the event.
Right.
The third vendor, and please correct me if I'm wrong from the two members on the ad hoc committee, third vendor, I believe, provided a structure, 3 different structures. Basically, we'll take all the risk, we'll take all the liability, we're taking all the proceeds. Number 2, we could do a cost sharing. And then number 3, budget it per vendor. So they're more of kind of the coordinator of the event, but there is a budget. And then there were some discussions with the number 3 vendor in terms of, because they were very specific, and I think it surprised many of us on that board of not wanting to do the 7,000 person event because of the logistics of parking and all the other liabilities in there, that they thought the sweet spot was somewhere between that 1 and I'll say 3,000. I might be off on my numbers there. That if we could keep it within there, they would basically provide all the management.
And that's exactly what we were looking for with the last one that you just said. They're taking the entire responsibility. They're not asking for a retainer, and they understand the concept of what the purpose of us doing this RFP is for.
Correct. And let me add on one point there that I forgot to add. They did mention if you want Luke Bryan, if you want Blake Shelton to come here, there is going to be added cost beyond that because there's security, there's pulling in a huge motor home, there's there's always a lot more detail with those A-list.
Trust me, I was
events.
just throwing that out. Believe me, I think you already know that in the past I've always said, listen, I want to start small and I want to be successful. And then as we get that down perfectly, well, it's never perfect. There's always logistical issues, as you know. But for the most part, just 1,000 or 3,000 is perfect for us to get through the first year and then reevaluate where we're at, what the logistical issues are, what is working, what is not working, what is responsibility. Maybe there'll be more responsibility from the city, maybe there'll be less, but we're not going to know until we get through that first year. So for me, the one that you told me that they're going to take on all the responsibility, that's the type of management promoter company that I envision for the city of Murrieta. They're taking it over. We're only focusing on our small ones that we do internally.
Correct, but let me preface that by saying we do
that because there's a problem with that. When you have somebody that comes in and what they're saying is we're going to do Blake Shelton or they're going to do the Eurythmics or anyone else that is a banner group, it comes back to exactly what they're saying earlier is they're going to want us to absorb the cost because 3,000 people will not cover Blake Shelton. It's not possible.
I threw that out there.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking to myself.
No. I'm saying based on what this company said, they want to start with an event with a maximum of about 3,000 people. And I think that that's perfect for the first year. Let's reevaluate after each concert or festival, whatever they bring forward. And let's just reevaluate each one of them. And then after we get done with the 4 to 6, let's regroup and let's pow out, see what worked and what did not work.
So out of the 3, did I read correctly that there was one in here that was willing to start out with nothing to kind of give us the information? Can you explain that to me, please?
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. The vendor, applicant number 3, again, they proposed 3 different funding models or structures, basically. I believe, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, those members of the ad hoc committee, I believe one of those structures was they will take on the ticketing, the security, paying for the event. However, just know that they will take all of the proceeds.
So for this evening as well, you know, bringing back the recommendation of the subcommittee, we did not include information on the specific vendors, trying to separate that conversation from identifying that there were some more policy areas that we needed input from the council on. And so that's part of what we were not planning to talk about that for this evening.
Mayor, if I could also jump in.
Can I
Sure.
just, sorry, ask one more question? Because she said something that was really important, that this vendor is going to take all the proceeds. And that's fine if they're going to take all the proceeds, but there has to be a structure of them paying us for the usage of our facility.
Right. I mean, I didn't say that just now, but that's part of that, that understanding that the council's intentions and what your vision is for that, so that we would be able to provide that feedback to a prospective vendor to understand what that model would look like and have a chance to talk to you about that. It's part of also identifying those other aspects of it, who would be responsible for which elements of it.
Right.
Madam City Manager.
Thank you. I think it's important to realize that there are kind of two discussions going on here, right? So at the staff level, it's not about who we contract with. It's about helping them be successful and start off on the right path. And there's so many questions that we're almost setting them up for failure. And so 2 council members on a subcommittee can't make these decisions. It takes 3 of you. And these questions that are coming up, I think, are the same questions that the subcommittee faced. Is there a better way to address it? I think we're all a little bit floundering somewhat.
Listen, if the RFP was to select a company that can bring this together, and it sounds like there is one, I would like to find out, first of all, who it is, select them, and then let's open up these conversations with this company, because it sounds like that they're capable of negotiating in good faith. And while I like the fact that they are taking on all the responsibility, but I would sure like to hear about the profit sharing. That's where I'm at.
So I've given this process a lot of thought and thinking about what could next steps look like, trying to anticipate what the conversation would be. And a couple of different options that could potentially be combined would be, we bring back an item and identify the topics that we've brought for you with a proposed kind of, what would that look like based on some of what we've heard from you tonight, based on some of how it's worked already with events, kind of those big guideposts like I was talking about, how that would look like. And then also an item to report back on the vendors that we received proposals from, and a recommendation of how to proceed from there. And I think that's something to further vet out. It looks like Councilmember Whitehesser wants to
But
add.
just to clarify, we don't have any responses to, we don't have any proposals. We only, and we even in our conversations with the applicants or respondents said, did an RFI to kick the tires, to find out more information, to build a proposal. If we are ready to go to a proposal at some time, we would need to know, we want this cornhole tournament, we want this wine and beer festival, so that our bidders can respond with cost-effective proposals based on the types of 4 to 6 events that we're specifying in our RFP.
Although, in talking with the city attorney, having done a request for information and identified firms that are qualified to do the work that the council is identifying as qualified, the direction could be to go back and continue the discussion with one or more of those vendors to present the information on here's what we're looking for, and to get the cost information back to then make a decision.
How about we allow them to do their job, and they've been doing this for a while, I'm assuming, and having them bring suggestions to us what they believe would benefit the city of Murrieta. We talked about thinking outside the box. Allow them to do their job to bring us suggestions.
again, it would be the types of things that they would be responding to, or that we would be identifying as some of those big picture issues related to the facility and the neighborhood of what the council would want how they would want them to incorporate that into what they do.
Just for clarification, and all the times, and I've been here before this thing was built, we've always had the discussion on how it would be utilized, the public access component to it. We keep going down this rabbit hole. And I mean, it just like, I'm starting to feel like Alice in Wonderland now. Now I'm getting a headache from it, because the direction is that we were to bring somebody in to manage those 6 events, those 6 major events. That's it, nothing else. Staff does a phenomenal job with what they do. And we were going to look at it later on in the future to see, how do we expand on it? How did that work? How do we afford that opportunity? We've been done since 2000, is that correct, with the amphitheater?
2001.
Yeah. And so between COVID and all the other stuff, we really haven't been afforded the. Yeah. Okay, so which one is it? Because you guys are having the conversation down there without us. So.
2001.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
2021.
Okay, so then, and I agree with the city manager. I mean, at some point, we've got to give them something where they're going to succeed. But it's sounding to me like there's only one company that maybe has the ability to do this. I don't know from an RFP standpoint with the city attorney may elaborate on that. Is that the same as the lowest bidder process that we would do again? It's not?
No, it's not.
Okay, so wouldn't it be prudent to bring that information back to the council? Let's take a look at it, see if it's affordable, maybe negotiate an interim where we do 1 or 2 events to see how they do. And if it doesn't work, then we say, you know what, thank you for your time. But at some point, moving forward with something, because the concern is, and I guess, again, that'll be for the council in January to make that decision, because now it's going to go to January. And we've been on this for quite a while. So I'm just curious as to what it's going to take to actually get it accomplished.
And a lot of these major festivals and concerts, they book out a year in advance.
Mayor Pro Tem had a question.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, no worries. Lori, you can finish.
No, okay, go ahead.
I would just like to pose a solution. Do we need a motion? Because I think we should bring back, I trust the subcommittee. I have no idea who this was, but I trust the subcommittee that they chose the person that came, and we only had 3 bidders. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Bidders.
Or
Respondents.
applicants. So we only had 3 proposals. And obviously one was the best that stood out, and that you all agreed upon. No.
I'm seeing Councilmember White shake her head.
The one
no.
that sounded best to me was the one that was free, that was willing to put the events on, and they got the proceeds.
Right.
Because that's the one I would be experimenting with.
And that
at
would
this
be the
point.
one that I'd like to
And if there's not
make the motion
and
forward.
and there's not consensus with the ad hoc committee, let's bring that one back based on our conversation, and let's interview him from the dais or her, whoever it is, and move forward.
Hey, can I interject something here?
Please.
It's not that there's not a consensus. We didn't do a scoring. We were gathering information. So if you will allow us to go back and meet and then look at the applicants, score the applicants, and come back with the one that we agree, whether we all agree or not, the consensus would, whoever got the most scoring would then be the one we would bring back to you. Would that be fair?
Here, I'll make a suggestion. This will be twice that I've done this in one night, and I've never in the history of my political career have I done this. Let's get a workshop on it and be done with it. And that's coming from the mayor pro tem saying we need a workshop to finish this, because it needs to be finished.
Let's bring the vendors back in and let's put it out so we have them all present to us, and then we'll move forward from there. Absolutely. Is that?
I'm sure the city manager's going, yeah, another workshop.
If that's
Mayor.
what the council desires, that's what we'll do.
But see, to me, I'm sitting going, why don't we just experiment with, if it's free, the worst, but is it free? And if they don't earn capital, that they're going to expect us to compensate the difference. That's my concern.
That is true.
Right? Because there's nothing
No.
for nothing in this world.
Is stated by the vendor.
Oh, it is.
That
Okay.
was, they are not coming in and developing a business model for our amphitheater and assuming any out-of-pocket expenditures. If they don't feel that they can break even, which they said they do not anticipate they can break even in the first year, the city has to have a budget and be willing to cover the loss. They said if you got in year 2 and if you broke even and didn't have a loss in year 2, you would be doing exceedingly well.
See, I don't necessarily
No one is
buy
going to
that,
come in
though.
here and from the applicants or the respondents and assume all the risk.
No, and I got that, but and again, I'm not asking to build a model. That's experimental. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams, if you'd have told me that the Fireman's Barbecue would have been as successful as it was, I would have been astonished. If you would have told me that the trunk or treat that we had the other night, where we had people lined up to Washington and Calmia, that it was going to be that large, I would have never believed it. So I've seen the capacity and how it's handled. I know that, again, you have talent coordinator and then you have an event coordinator and or planner, right? And that's where you bring a company in and you go, like one of the companies I used to work with, Extraordinary Events. They go, we want this, this, and this. We're looking for this type of person to come to the venue to put on this event. They provided all the information, logistics, and said, this is what we're going to do. Now, if we wanted a portion of or a cut of that event, then there were certain requirements that had to be met.
It's profit sharing.
But if we're looking at, we're going to go, okay, we're not looking to make a profit. We're looking to provide an event and access, but we have to break even so there's no cost to the city. That's completely different. So again, whoever is going to help with the management of those 6 events, that's what they do. They're not the talent coordinator. They're not bringing the talent. And I don't see 6 or 12,000 people coming to a cornhole tournament. I just don't. Or for that matter, even a carnival, because I don't think the park's designed for that. But I think that we have opportunity for Philharmonics, plays, and other stuff that we could capitalize on. But we can't for some reason, we just can't seem to move forward to get to the first one to see how it's going to work.
I have just one more question. The one that said that they're going to take on the entire liability and responsibility. Did they say that if they lost money that they were expecting?
Councilmember White just said yes, they did.
I'm asking Brian, is that true that because this is contradictory. She's saying that they're saying that the liability would be on the city. Brian is saying that this vendor said the responsibility was all on them. The city wouldn't have anything we would not be responsible for anything. So that one vendor, so is it true that they're expecting, if they don't make money, that they expect the city to write a check?
I'll defer to the whole committee, 'cause my memory on that might not be exact. I think Councilmember White was reading from notes, but I'm not positive about that.
I'd have to go back and look as well. I'm not sure either.
Okay, so I'm going to concur with Mayor Pro Tem. I like to bring back the vendors. I would like for all of us to interview them to get there are still a lot of questions that need to be asked, and let's just finally, make the selection and go from there.
So how long will it take to do something like that and convene it, Madam City Manager? Probably the first of the year?
I would say yes, especially if we're looking at other workshops as well. So we could bring it back. We're dark the first meeting in January. We could do everything we could to bring it back the second meeting in January.
Okay. Does that work for you, Mayor?
Okay.
Yep. Councilmember White, you're sure that in your notes they?
I'm not reading from my notes.
Oh, okay.
My bottom line takeaway from all of the respondents when we got through discussing the various, for example, the cost sharing with the 2 other funding options that were discussed by vendor or respondent number 3, the bottom line was always, but we're not covering this if it doesn't work, and it's not going to be profitable or break even the first year based on our experience. So there was always that as the underlying principle that the city would have to cover any out-of-pocket losses that while this is being developed and it takes 2 to 3 years to have it be developed. That was kind of the gist of.
So is it possible, Madam City Attorney, to get, for lack of a better term, a bio on these firms that have provided this, as long as it stays within the council, so we can look at the qualifications to these people to see? Because it just doesn't equate with me that there are firms out there that are doing this. They're going to look at the venue and go, it either works or it doesn't work. And they're going to know. That's what they do, right?
I would assume they submitted something in connection with the RFI that would be a public record, so anyone can see it.
Do we have that ability? That might be something you provide before the workshop and give instruction to the council on how that information is to be handled so that everybody's on the same page. Yes, Councilmember White?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One respondent said that they would go on a retainer and help the city build an RFP and build some parameters specifically.
That's something definitely that we could talk in the works. That's not a bad idea. I'm not.
And respondent number 3 had several different options, and both respondent number 2 and number 3 said, we need the city to give us more specifics so that we can come back to you with a proposal. We don't have enough, but again, respondent number 2 said, but if you don't have enough, you could hire us on a retainer and we'll help you work through it, knowing that we are going to give us the contract. So there's that. And then I would also like to encourage us to think about building an RFP and allowing more applicants to respond to the actual parameters outlined in the RFP would probably yield more of a response than the open net that we did from the RFI. And I think having more than 2 respondents to the RFP would actually be more competitive in a purchasing situation and would allow the city to not make very many mistakes and would learn a lot from that process.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, we could do a parameter, and then put it out for. So Kim, when you go out for an RFP, what specific parameters would you see to go forward with this project? Or Kristen,
I think it would be good if staff was able to go back and set those parameters. And if the council's willing to give us a little more license than we normally would ask for, we can, work to put those together to bring them back. And then I would say, similar to the fire code, we can go through and change it how you want it changed so that ultimately it's the policy direction. And again, this is painful because it's the first time.
Right.
And it's not something that we do all the time, right? We want to get it right and we want to be transparent and we all want to come out of this having it be a success. That's staff's concern, is we just want to make sure that whoever is selected starts off on a good footing.
So
I agree with that.
Can I make a motion that we bring this back to staff then, that they put together an RFP, go out for an RFP, and then we bring it back for a workshop if needed?
Before you make the motion.
Okay.
You gotta take
Hold my motion.
So hold your motion.
Are you going to
Hold
call
your-
for comments?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, sorry.
Public comments?
Yes.
Okay. May I make a
Sure.
comment before public comments?
I'm
So
sorry.
if we went with Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion, all of the items that are outlined, and it's not all inclusive, but the types of policy direction that the staff is looking for who would you want all of these things to be defined by in order for it to be correctly inputted into the RFP? Because these are the types of policy direction that the subcommittee and staff determined that we would like to have agreement and consensus on all of the items that are listed here.
It's 6 events. I personally don't think that we have to get that far into the weeds at this point, because we can build on this as we're going along. But we start out with a simple thing: venue. What we expect for return. We're not looking to make a profit. We're looking to make sure that it's not costing taxpayers money.
Community event.
Right. It's a good community event, that we can handle the parking. I've said before, on large events, we normally subbed out that we had companies that probably wouldn't come here, but we have Aloha Parking that used to come, and they would go to remote venues, and that's specifically what they do. This is what they do for a living. And how they were paid, they charged for the cars to be parked and said, okay, it's $5 to park the car. Those costs come to us. Now, does the city get compensated for that? Sure, I'm sure they can get a percentage of it. But you don't know until you actually start doing the events, right? And I think that's kind of the key here, is we are so deep into the ways. This is like doing a $30 million movie production at this point. It's very complicated. I think we start out with just basics and go by what staff already knows and go by what the desires of the council is and what we've specifically talked about before, and not get so convoluted. It's just, like I said, I feel like I'm going down a rabbit hole. It's too much.
Mayor, maybe if I could ask for consensus to one question, it might be able to help provide us with some direction.
Okay.
So
wow, that will be great.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot.
One question and we might get to
we'll
them
try.
here.
I think there's a lot of confusion. So as long as I've been here 8 years, and there's been talk about building this amphitheater, and we built a state-of-the-art facility that is amazing. And I don't believe that previous councils or staff ever anticipated that this wouldn't be a loss to the city. I mean, this is a community, this is something that we give to the community and we put on community events. It's sort of like the pool. It's not going to make us money. It's probably going to cost us money in the long run. So my question would be, how does the council view this? Do they view it as they want to make money and have a return to pay off part of the amphitheater to cover the cost? No, please, but that's part of the question, right? Is that what the council's looking for? Or is the council like, and I'm oversimplifying it with the pool, but saying that this is something that, a service that we're providing to the community, and there will be costs to the city. There just will. But I don't think we ever assumed there wouldn't be, right?
So and I got what you're saying, but I'm going to respectfully disagree. I'm not going to have a for-profit entity come in that's going to sell tickets, utilize our venue, make a profit, and then charge the taxpayers to actually provide that venue for that company. Now, if we're talking about a local charity, we're talking about, Michelle's Place or one of our signature events, that's a different story. I don't have an issue with that. And I would expect that we would lose money on that, or at least, provide a service that is for the community. But what we're talking specifically about are 6 events that are major events. And I'm not saying that we need to make a profit, but we should certainly be compensated for the expense for that.
But that's the answer to the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the answer that we need
So
to move forward.
Is there a consensus on that?
yeah,
Or-
when you get into profit sharing, then the city is going to be liable. The city's going to have expenses. They're not going to take the risk all on their own. We talked about, renting out the facility. that's where my head's at, is just renting out the facility.
Let's consign it, yeah.
And allowing them to do their job. And if they profit off it, they profit off it. It's a business, making money. It's an amenity to our community. And when you get into profit sharing, that's where it opens up Pandora's box to what Councilwoman White is talking about.
Okay, we kind of beat the skin off this bongo.
But until we decide this part of it, correct, City Manager, until we decide that part of it, how could we go forward?
Right. And if the council could give us, and again, we won't necessarily hold you to it, but consensus to send us in the direction of what you've kind of just agreed to, that gives us some place to go.
Well, that was my whole point. We're dealing with 6 events right now. We're not dealing with the overall structure of how the amphitheater is going to be run over the next decade.
But we also have to be concerned about how do we fold in our nonprofits and our other groups. It all kind of meshes, even though they're really separate things and they're managed by separate people. They're still going to have some impact on each other.
But our nonprofits will be managed by our city staff who already has policy and experience on that.
We do. We don't have policy for an event at the amphitheater. And again, if the council would like us to just apply this park special event policy
I say we just move
it,
forward with the workshop.
we do that too.
Like you said, we've got almost 10 o'clock at night. We still got another item, and we've discussed this to nauseum now. We're not getting anywhere. I say we just go ahead, set up a workshop, set the parameters up, and go from there.
And I direct staff to do just what you said.
Yeah.
City Manager.
And we need to decide whether it's going to be a profit sharing type of partnership or whether it is a contract out business.
I can tell you a lot of people frowned on that in the past.
But again, I think that they should be able, if we're going to do a workshop, have them come back with the statistics of both.
Okay.
Weighing one or the other.
Mayor, can I ask the city attorney one question, please?
Sure.
Do we have to do an RFP, or can we make a decision on the RFI with the 3 presenters?
Yeah, as Ms. Crane said earlier, you don't have to go through that formal process. You can pick 1 or 2 to negotiate with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so all this will be discussed when it comes back at the workshop. Is that the plan? Yes. We have consensus on that? Councilmember White?
Sure.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, and thank you, the committee, for working on this difficult subject as well.
Complicated.
Very convoluted. Thank you.
Madam City Attorney, we don't have to do anything on the record. Just receive and file, or we just move forward? Yeah, we do. We're good? Okay, thank you. All right, the last item, item number 11. Staff, please. Oh, you know what? Did we have a public speaker? We never.
Oh, I saw Kim. Yeah.
I thought we had. Okay.
No.
I'm sorry. All right, please. I'm going. Uh-oh.
Ready? Are we ready to move on to the next item?
Yes, quickly.
Okay. All right, quickly?
Yes.
Okay. So item 11 on your agenda is a routine biannual action item regarding city council compensation per Measure D that's was adopted by the Murrieta voters in November 2010. That section established a section of the municipal code and sets forth a procedure for how this works, which is limiting the city council compensation to 15% of the Murrieta median family income. There's also a section of the government code which permits council member compensation to be increased at a rate of not to exceed 5% for each calendar year from the operative date of the last adjustment, which in the case of the Murrieta Council was this time 2 years ago in 2020. In completing a study that was commissioned by the city of Murrieta, the research firm The Retail Coach established that the 2022 base median income for Murrieta is $99,755 per year, and that's included in your agenda report as attachment 2. So 15% of that equates to $1,246.94 per month. The monthly council compensation is $1,134.20 per month. So based upon that study by the retail coach, the compensation can increase for the council. And that's also consistent with the government code since it's under 10%, which it's been 2 years. So you're able to make that increase. And there's the reason that we do this at this time of year as we're getting ready to have new council members coming on board, a change in new terms beginning. That's why it happens now, and it will take effect January 1st of 2023. The fiscal impact overall is about $3,600 over and above what's included in the adopted budget. I did want to note there was one typo in the agenda report where there was the word "of" that should have said "to." So I apologize for that error. And in conclusion, we recommend that you adopt the ordinance 582-22 that's included in your agenda report.
Okay, let's bring it back up to the council. Yeah.
30 more minutes.
All right, so comments, discussion. Councilmember White?
Well, I appreciate that there's transparency on this item and that we didn't do it as a consent item. It's great to have you present to us 2 items in one night, so welcome aboard. Discussing it in public really enhances our transparency, so that's important. I don't really have anything to say other than that I think it's very noteworthy that our median income is $274, I think, short of $100,000 being our median income, which in terms of our demographics and economic development, that is an amazing feature about the city of Murrieta and is quite noteworthy. So I wanted to highlight that. Those are my comments, Mr. Mayor, unless you'd like me to elaborate a little bit more.
Councilmember Warren?
I have no comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Stone?
No comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem?
No comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, come on.
Well, I'll talk for 45 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
All right, so no comments. I mean, this is something we've done consistently. It's nothing that I've seen change. At this point, do we have anybody for public comment, Madam City Clerk?
Seeing none.
Okay, let's call for a motion then, people. And a second, please.
I have
I've changed it.
a motion by Councilmember Warren, and I'm waiting on second.
Your blank screen again.
Yeah.
Okay. Just roll call, please.
Well, I'm looking for a second. So can I just get the second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember White?
Yes?
Councilmember Stone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're voting.
That's the roll call?
Yeah.
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem DeForest?
Yes.
Mayor
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously to conduct the first reading of ordinance 585-22, entitled an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Murrieta, California, amending the compensation of the City Council.
Okay. That brings us to governing body announcements. I double dog dare you. Most.
Just what you're having. Pictures and everything. I deferred. I have to talk for another 10 minutes.
Okay. Are we done? Can we adjourn now?
We'll call so we can say that we filed them.
Yeah, we did. And
We did.
Councilmember White?
I have reported so that they'll be called out on our website, and I won't go into them specifically. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my comments, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone.
I will defer.
Councilmember Warren.
Receive and file.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I will defer. I have cute pictures for next time.
Thank you. All right, so if you have any questions, please feel free to call me, check my public calendar. On that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Okay, have a nice evening, everyone. And staff, thank you very much.